Good morning. I call to order the County of Placer Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, December 11th, 2012 at 9 a.m. We will begin this morning with the flag salute led by our County Executive, David Bosch. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, David. Now we will move on to our statement of meeting procedures read by our clerk of the board, Ann Holman.
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, December 11th, 2012. Agendas are available on the wall outside this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there's a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. If you are hearing impaired, we have listening devices available. It is requested that all pagers and cell phones be either turned off or put in the silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thank you, Ann. Now is the time for public comment. This is the opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on any item not on today's agenda. You have 3 minutes for your comments. Is there anyone who would like to address the board under public comment today? If so, please come forward and identify yourself. Big chance for public comment. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment, and I will move us to our supervisors' committee reports. Any committee reports today? Supervisor Wygant.
I'd actually like to report, first of all, thank the board for the funding of the Sheridan Community Plan, but we had an introductory kickoff meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we had over 100 people attend, and it really got started well, and want to thank staff for all the work that they put into it and preparations for it. It was really a perfect send-off. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Supervisor Holmes.
Oh, I just wanted to make the public aware of the National Night Out Awards that Placer County received. The award winners were announced for the 2012 National Night Out. The Placer County Sheriff's Office did it again. We placed in the top 15 of Category 1, which consists of cities and counties in the United States with a population of 300,000 or more. So I want to thank Lynn Harrison, Dina Irwin, Amanda Rogers, and Ms. Venezuela for all their work in promoting National Night Out and making it a success and nationally recognized. So thank you for that. That's my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Holmes. Supervisor Euler.
Just want to mention that at our PCTPA meeting, it was moved and seconded that Supervisor Holmes will be vice chair next year, or you chair next year? Vice chair next year, to rotate into the chairmanship the year following. So in addition to be chair of this board next year, possibly, assuming you can get the votes.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And also I've been appointed as the CalCog
That's
representative, right. Whatever that is.
So he's taking even more time out of his day.
All right. Then I just did want to mention that I did last week on Thursday attend the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board and just gave a presentation to that board on the 4 regional projects, wastewater projects that Placer County is either has just completed or we are moving forward with. They were pleased to see someone there from Placer County. They have asked me to come back and keep them updated on a regular basis, which I have committed to doing so. And then I will also be starting to attend, as appropriate, the State Water Resources Control Board meetings, just to keep them updated on Placer's progress on regionalization projects, including the projects on SMD1 and SMD3. So that is what I have going with committee reports. We'll now move to the consent agenda. These are the items on pages 4 through 11. All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval. All will be approved by a single roll call vote unless anyone wishes to pull a consent item and address it prior to the board taking action. Is there anyone who would like to pull anything? Supervisor Duran.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to have a brief discussion on item 16B, loan write-offs.
16B, okay. Anything else? Supervisor Holmes?
I'd like to pull 21A for discussion.
Okay. Anything else? Any member of the board? Any member of the public want to pull anything from consent for discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will start with item 16B. Supervisor Duran?
Yes.
We need a vote.
Do you want a
Oh, I'm
motion
sorry.
on the rest of it?
I'm sorry, let's have a motion on the rest of
Move
that.
approval of consent absent items 16B and 21A.
Second.
All right, this is a roll call.
Euler.
Aye.
Duran.
Yes.
Weigand.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Montgomery.
Yes. Okay, we now move to 16B. Supervisor Duran.
Great. I just had a couple of questions with regards to this particular item for loan write-offs. And do we have someone in the,
Sure, somebody's scrambling for it right now.
yeah. Michael, is this yours? Okay, great. As far as writing off the loan, I just want to confirm that we have explored every option to acquire whatever funds that we've expended on these particular loans.
That is correct.
Okay, there's no legal remedy, there's no,
No, staff has worked very closely with county council to pursue all options that may be available, and it was after exhausting those options that the write-off was presented to your board for consideration.
okay, so these folks are either in foreclosure, bankruptcy, without a
Correct.
remedy for us?
Correct.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay.
I move approval.
Second.
And do we need a roll call on this or just a voice vote? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. 21A.
Yes, this is the item regarding the Hangar 52 lease agreement at the Placer County Sheriff's Department at the Auburn Airport. Merv Hall, a longtime local businessman, has generously donated the use of that hangar to the Placer County Sheriff's Department. Merv Hall and I started out as lowly gas station owners way back in the day. He's been much more successful than I have, but anyhow, I hold him in high regard, and I'm pleased that he was generously donating this hangar to the Placer County Sheriff's Department, and I would like to invite Sheriff Bonner up to make some comments regarding that as well.
There we go. Thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Holmes, almost Chairman. You get the votes. Ed Bonner, Placer County Sheriff. I appreciate pulling this off because I just want to say a few words about Merv Hall. As long as I can remember, he's just been a pillar of the community, for a civic leader, and just incredibly generous. And with his generous donation of this hangar space is really going to assist the Placer County Sheriff's Office in providing public safety from the sky. And I just wanted to publicly, thank him and recognize him for this just tremendous donation. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Bonner. Any other comments on that? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right. At this time, before we get to our first 9:30 timed item, which all the folks in blue are here for, we are going to go into closed session. We will be back at 9:30 for the timed item. Take it away, Jerry.
The board will now adjourn to closed session to discuss the litigation, the items listed on item 11 of the agenda on page 4 are the existing litigation items. The board will not be discussing County of Placer versus Cardozo, and there'll also be conference with real property negotiators and conference with labor negotiators.
We'll see you at 9:30.
Council, Angela Taylor versus Nancy Huntley in the County of Placer. The board authorized the defense of indemnity of the employee and the county. Board did not discuss Cardozo or the other litigation item, which will be deferred to the next closed session that we have. The board also discussed, had a conference with its labor negotiators and gave direction to its labor negotiators. That concludes this closed session report.
Thank you, Jerry. All right, I apologize for the delay. We'll now be moving to our 9:30 timed item, and this is absolutely delightful to me to be able to do this. We're being asked today to approve and present commendations to 3 Dutch Flat volunteer firefighters, and these are folks who you see in their community constantly, whether it's the 4th of July parade or at the community center or just out in the very, very many events that Dutch Flat holds throughout the year. The individuals that we're honoring today are Charlie Bridges, Robert, otherwise known as Bob Jocelyn, and Keith Peterson. And between the three of them, they have 111 collective years of volunteer service to their community and to Dutch Flat Fire. For those of you who don't know, Dutch Flat is a small community in the 5th District in the northeastern part of Placer County. It's on a ridge between the Bear River and the North Fork of the American, and it has kind of the unique distinction of being, I think, literally the only gold rush town in California that has not burned in part or in entirety. And a huge reason for that is because they have long had a robust volunteer fire department and people who really, really very passionately protect and support their communities. And so as I say, this really does delight me to be able to have this opportunity today for so many reasons. There's a few things that I just wanted to read in here because I think it's worth noting. Charlie has had over 45 years of continuous volunteer service, and he served as the captain at Dutch Flat Fire for the past 20 years. Bob Jocelyn has had over 41 years of continuous service. Bob is also an EMT, has an associate degree in fire science, and has been a self-employed geotechnical engineer in Placer County for over 30 years. Keith Peterson's the new guy in that he only has 25 years as a volunteer. Keith is also a certified EMT, and in his spare time works for the California Highway Patrol in their maintenance division. And so although the number of volunteers at Dutch Flat Fire has fluctuated over the years, sometimes swelled ranks, sometimes diminished ranks, these three amigos, as they're called, have really been the glue that has kept the fire district, the fire department running, committed to the community, and operations running steady. I have 3 different commendations here. I'm not going to read all of them because we would be here until tomorrow if I read everything in here, but I did want to just highlight a couple of things here. This commendation is specific to Charlie Bridges, and I think it's important to note that Charlie and his 2 sisters were raised in Dutch Flat. So again, that connection to community. It's a tiny little community, but just absolutely passionate about protecting and preserving what they have. Charlie joined Dutch Flat Fire in 1967. His wife Dorothy also joined the fire department, and together they became a mainstay for their community, always dependable and willing to respond. Dutch Flat responds to about 250 calls per year, including fire, emergency medical response, accidents on I-80. Union Pacific Railway runs through their response area, so they have just a plethora of calls that they respond to. I also wanted to point out that serving the Dutch Flat community is a family affair for Charlie. In addition to his wife's participation, his mother started the Ladies Auxiliary in Dutch Flat that continues to focus on fundraising for the fire department to assist with purchasing equipment and supplies needed for the firefighters. I'm going to grab the next one of these. This is for Bob Jocelyn. And Bob and his family moved to Placer County in 1964, so they're almost locals now. And he's been in Dutch Flat since 1971. And he was recruited to the Dutch Flat Fire Department pretty much the day he got to Dutch Flat by former Chief William Fanning. And he is, I had something else here. He's an emergency medical technician, has an associate degree in fire science, and has been self-employed, as I said, for a geotechnical engineer for 30 years. Bob has had many memorable experiences on the fire department, but in one incident, he fell through the floor during a structure fire in Alta, which made quite an impact, I like who writes these things, and drove home the dangers of each call. Bob currently serves as a fire apparatus engineer and has had for several years continuing with that service. Last but certainly not least, Keith Peterson was recruited by his good friend Charlie Bridges. And he and his wife moved to Dutch Flat 31 years ago. They live in a beautiful Victorian home that's been in their family since the 1940s. And they, when asked why he chooses to volunteer, Keith responded by saying, "I find community service and helping people to be the most rewarding experience ever, and I don't mind a bit sacrificing weekends to stay home and take care of the town." And I think that's really the beauty and what we look for with volunteers, people who have that absolutely selfless commitment to protect their homes, their communities, their environment, and frankly provide services to total strangers on I-80 and at Union Pacific. So it's my absolute great pleasure, and if the three of them could come forward, we'll come on up and present these one by one. These are, in the matter of commendations, thanking Keith Peterson, Charlie Bridges, and Bob Jocelyn for over 111 collective years of volunteer service to their community and to the Dutch Flat Fire Department. And let me just say thank you, gentlemen. Keith.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Bob. And Charlie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. It's great to see you guys as well. Get a few photos, and then we'd love it if you could all just say a few words and let us know how much fun. I know, danger. I'm opening it up here. Let's all. You want to? Okay, there we go. Get in here, Keith. Don't be shy. All right. So who's going first? You get to go last, so we make sure it's short. I know it precedes you. Please.
I just want to thank Jennifer and the board for this and everybody. It's been a pleasure all the years working with Cal Fire. They're excellent people to work with. And all the volunteers, present and past. Without everybody doing their part, this wouldn't happen. And I don't like giving speeches, so that's kind of it for me.
I don't know, like I said, I'm the young guy, the young old guy for a while. Like I said, these guys, we all watch each other back and everything, but once again, I'd like to thank Cal Fire as well. They do all the training for us and keep us up to speed on what's going on. And a lot of great people I've met through the time I've been doing that service, and look forward to doing some more. It's been great, a lot of fun, good experience.
I'm shy and retiring and don't really know what to say. Yeah. I've been asked to not say much, so it's been a real pleasure. These guys are great. Cal Fire, real good to work with. A lot of memorable experiences with all of you guys. And it's been a real pleasure. Thanks.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. And there is a reception immediately following. I believe it's if you go out this door and down to the right, there's a room set up with some, I think, cake and soda. Rui, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, Chief Harris?
Okay, Chief Harris.
Well, I would like to say just a couple words about the three gentlemen you had up here. You know, we talk about 250 calls a year. It's really difficult to quantify what they actually provide to their community. Not only do they respond to the 250 calls, and it's not just a 10 or 15-minute call all the time, there are instances that when their engine leaves, it may not come back for a week. So that's the amount of dedication that those folks have to their community. And in addition to going to the calls, there's also the required training. You know, the youngest of the group, having only been there for 25 short years, can probably attest to the fact that the requirements we have for volunteers has changed greatly. Their training requirements would require them to be at the station more, to spend hours and hours of training, in which they do selflessly for their community. And as we account for the 112 years that those gentlemen have provided in experience to the fire service, at the same time, during this time of year, we're starting to see our older staff start to retire. And this year alone, we're losing 180 years collective experience in 6 individuals that are retiring from CAL FIRE. So without these volunteers are doing the things that they do to help protect the communities, it'd be very difficult for us to provide for fire protection and safety in those communities, especially the mountain communities like Dutch Flat that are sparsely populated, difficult to get to. Without their local knowledge, the things that we provide up there for safety would be most difficult. But mostly, I'd like to say, nice tie, Bob.
Thank you. And if you'd all like to follow Rui out, there's coffee and cake. And again, gentlemen, thank you so much, and ladies as well. Really, really appreciate your service. Okay, we will now move to our 9:45 timed item. This is an item from County Council Office. Krista Darlington presenting the County Conflict of Interest Code. Welcome.
Welcome. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm Krista Darlington with the County Council's Office, and I'm here this morning to present to you a project that our office has been working on for the past 6 to 9 months, and it's a revamp of the county's Conflict of Interest Code, which is found in Article 2.84 of the County Code. This morning, what we'll need to do is to discuss the changes to the code and come up with the justification for 3 findings. Each of the findings needs to be made in order to approve an amendment to a Conflict of Interest Code in California. The first is to provide the code provides reasonable assurance that all foreseeable potential conflicts of interest situations will be disclosed or prevented, and that the designated person has a clear and specific statement of duties under the code, and finally, that the code adequately differentiates between designated employees. After making those findings, our office would ask that you consider adopting the ordinance that's attached, as well as the resolution that includes the appendix of the county positions that file Form 700s for Placer County. So a quick background. I'm not going to read the whole staff report here, but I'll just give you a quick summary of it. Basically, the county's Conflict of Interest Code hasn't been revamped in some time, and we saw there was an opportunity to make some changes and to really streamline the county code. A lot of it was a reiteration of state law, and there isn't really a need to do that. We can cross-reference the code sections and make it easier to read and more efficient, as well as some minor changes that had been made over the years. A couple of items that are required to be in your county Conflict of Interest Code include some specific process details related to how folks get their forms when they have to turn them in, and that's all laid out in the ordinance. And it also it's required that we reiterate the state law that describes the manner of disqualification if an employee does have a conflict of interest, and that is described in Section 2.84.060 as the state law requires. The most significant requirement of the law is that the county designate employees and members of county committees and commissions who have potential conflicts and require them to disclose those financial interests. As such, we had taken a look at our code in the past. We had 2 disclosure categories, a full disclosure and a partial disclosure category. There was some confusion about when folks were going to disclose. Most or all of the limited disclosure category folks were disclosing everything. So we found that it would be in the best interest to go ahead and come up with 4 categories that were clearly delineated and gave people the opportunity to understand specifically what they would need to disclose. So the first disclosure category we'll talk about briefly is the full disclosure category, which hasn't changed at all and will remain the same, which again applies to folks who advise the Board of Supervisors on issues related to governmental decision-making or actively participate or influence your decision-making on behalf of a department or a division, or have the direct discretion over the value, use, boundaries, or purchasing of real property. So there's most of all of your division heads and their seconds fall in this full disclosure category, as well as other influential folks in the employees in the county. The second disclosure category is a limited disclosure category, and this is the one that has expanded a bit to include some new folks. And this specific one has to do with independent discretionary authority to spend money. And it's specifically not that they do spend money. It's not about that. It's about whether they have the authority to spend money, and that's an important distinction. So what they need to disclose each year is whether they have a financial interest in a business that would potentially do business with their department or with a specific business interest that they may have that they have discretion over. So it's a limited disclosure category in that they're not required to disclose other types of interests. It's really just the ones that relate to the business that they provide for the county and their financial discretion. The third category is related to those who participate in the discretionary distribution of funds through a public grant program. We only have 2 such positions right now in the county. One is the Animal Services Officer because of our grant program for the Animal Services. You're probably familiar with that program. The other is a position within the Children's System of Care because they have the discretion to hand out gift cards and such to needy families, and they have some discretion in spending in that way, and this is through a grant program. And so we have asked those 2 positions to disclose. Right now we don't have any other positions in that category. And then the fourth category and final category covers employees who issue permits, audit, or inspect properties or businesses. And this is basically applies to a lot of our code enforcement officers, our auditors, our inspectors, and those who go out and inspect, for example, restaurants, issue building permits, and those kind of folks. We would note that we have added a reference in that fourth and final category that covers the peace officer's Bill of Rights as requested by the Attorney's Office. Ms. Stagney requested that we add that on, and it does cross-reference the peace officer's Bill of Rights that they would only have to disclose things that are compatible with that peace officer's Bill of Rights, which we believe the conflict of interest code, as we've directed it, is consistent. Okay. We also have passed out in front of you here, the clerk passed out a version of the appendix because there was some copy errors. There was 2 missing pages, so you have that in front of you now. I also wanted to let you know that we do plan to do a review of the county's committees and commissions next year to fully go through review those purposes and functions of the committees and make sure that and just look it over, make sure that we have looked it over now, but we'll do a more in-depth research into some of the positions that are covered in that list in the back of your appendix. We've also made a few changes to the County Conflict of Interest Code that refers to our responsibility as a code reviewing body for special districts. In Placer County, we just brought those sections up to par with state law. In summary, we've improved the conflict of interest code, we hope, by making it more clear what folks have to disclose, and we've created 4 distinct categories of disclosure. One more point I want to bring up about the 4th disclosure category. That's the only one where you are not required each year to disclose what interests you might have that relate to the county. In the 4th category, as an inspector or an auditor, your requirement is only to disclose what you had a conflict. If you did have a conflict in the past year, you must disclose it. So it's much more limited than the first 3 categories. It is only if you must disclose what interests you did have in your caseload. So it's much more limited. So like I said, we've created these 4 distinct categories. We feel it's much clearer now for the employees what they have to disclose. I've worked with the clerk recorder's office, and Gina Myron is here behind me. We'll be working with getting training out, getting the forms out to folks, and helping everyone understand the differences. If you take a look at the appendix, you'll see that some positions have been crossed out in departments. I did meet with each department head and every one of them in Placer County. It was quite a pleasure to get to know everyone. And we did go through the different positions and talk about each position individually. So that's why it took six months to go through. And you'll see the bold titles are the ones that were added. A lot of the computer staff were removed because they really didn't have any discretion, and there really wasn't a reason for a lot of the computer staff to be filing these. And you'll notice that there is quite a few of them that are deleted throughout the list. If you have any other specific questions about positions or about the changes to the ordinance, I'd be happy to answer them.
Supervisor Duran.
Yes, thank you very much, Krista, for bringing this item before us. And I just kind of want to get to the summary of this whole thing. You've basically taken the substance that we've had and made it more easier or user-friendly, correct? You haven't changed the substance dramatically. It's mostly housekeeping.
As far as the ordinance is concerned, yes. The appendix has changed,
right,
which you can see the different positions. But as far as the ordinance, there are very little changes, mostly to cross-reference sections and not to just list them, because when they change, then we have to change our code. And
this is all consistent with state law?
Right, yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your work.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Any questions from the audience on this item? This is a public hearing, so I will open comment on public hearing at this point in time. So if anyone would like to come forward to address this item, now is your opportunity. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Krista. Good job. We'll move to our 10 o'clock timed item. This is a County Executive Department item relating to legislation. Allison Carlos presenting.
Good morning. Allison Carlos with the County Executive Office, introducing this item. I'm going to make my comments very, very brief because I think you want to spend your time talking to the advocates. That would be Peterson Consulting and Holland and Knight. We are asking for 3 actions today. One is that you would approve the 2013 legislative platform, approve 2 contracts, our advocacy contracts for Peterson Consulting and Holland and Knight. It's a 5% increase year over year. And also authorize board members to travel to Washington, D.C. next February for the annual federal trip. Just very briefly, the significant occurrences last year, the advocates will go over those things very specifically, not only the election, but as a result of bills that have passed and implementation of bills that have passed in prior years, such as the redevelopment piece. I do want to point out very specifically, though, that these contracts with the advocates are of high value to the county. For example, with AB 1484, which was the redevelopment legislation that did pass, we were extremely effective in working with Speaker Perez's office to change that bill so that we could keep properties in Tahoe that have government-related use, those parking lots. Also, we're extremely effective in Peterson Consulting being able to modify and codify some of the realignment of accounting practices for the blended services. So there's very specific things that are going on. With Holland and Knight, the Tiger 4 grant application was extremely close to being funded, which would have given us full funding for the Kings Beach project, as well as working with you on the sewer and extended term financing. So with that, I do want to point out in the platform for your board, there are 9 new items and 9 items that have come off because they have either been addressed or have been modified such that we didn't need to keep them on and working with our departments anymore. But certainly new platforms in CEQA reform, sustainable communities, realignment, and healthcare reform are among many of the other ones that are now included. So with that, I'm just going to turn the microphones right over to Karen Lang and Paul Yoder with Peterson Consulting, and then they're going to turn the microphone over to Rich Gold and Mike Galano with Holland and Knight. And then after that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and before we get started, I think there are a number of you who are here for the 10:15 item. If you wouldn't mind coming forward and just taking a chair. The fire marshal has major angst about people hanging out in the corridors against the wall. Tons of chairs available up front. If you could just come and find a chair, get seated, and we'll get to the 10:15 item as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Karen Lang with Peterson Consulting. I'm going to quickly go over what happened on the first Tuesday in November, and then I'll turn it over to Paul. With the passage of Prop 30, clearly there was a great deal of relief, I think, for the legislators who were otherwise facing a really serious deficit going into the next fiscal year, concerns about the public safety realignment being fully funded and protected. So there was a tremendous sense of relief with the passage of Prop 30, and it has paid dividends already in that the deficit they're facing in 2013-14 is actually $1.9 billion as of right now, although revenues are trending a little lower. But the passage of Prop 30 really did change the game for legislators in Sacramento for the next fiscal year. And we're actually remarking with our federal colleagues that for the first time in a long time, our House is more in order here in California than it is on the other side of the country. And frankly, in the entirety of my time here with the board, we've never had that circumstance. So it's sort of a new dynamic for us. Along with the passage of Prop 30, though, many of you are aware that the Democrats have achieved what is known as the supermajority. So they'll have over 2/3 in both houses, and that means many, many things. And initially we thought that it was really just on paper and it wouldn't actually be a functional 2/3 majority for quite some time due to some special elections that are going to be triggered. But as it turns out, with the very close election that was just decided in Senate District 5, which is the Galgiani-Berry Hill race, Kathleen Galgiani did end up winning that seat. So the Senate Democrats have 29 seated members now, even though 2 members will be going to Congress when they're sworn in January, which triggers 2 open Democratic-held Senate seats. But because Kathleen Galgiani won, they do have 27 seats in the Senate, even with those 2 vacancies. And once the special elections are called by the governor, which will happen after the 2 members are sworn into Congress, we expect that 1, if not 2 members of the Democratic Party that are currently in the Assembly will run for those 2 open Senate seats. If 1 or both of them win, that will trigger 1 or 2 open seats in the Assembly. However, you may have heard that there was a very late decision regarding a Assembly seat in northern Los Angeles County. And so while the Democrats, a week before they were sworn in, had 54, they now have 55 Assembly seats, which gives them 1 extra seat to burn in the Assembly. So if only 1 Assembly member wins the Senate special election race, they're still going to have a supermajority. So there had been this theory, if you've been following it, that there was not actually a functional 2/3 majority in both houses. That totally got eliminated about a week ago, and they will have 2/3 in 2013. What that was setting up for us was that in 2013 there would be a lot of positioning, a lot of bills introduced, but they wouldn't actually be able to approve a couple of really controversial things until after both houses were fully functional with the 2/3. That's not the case. So you'll see things, the constitutional amendments, which are, I think, really key for you to be aware of. The governor does not have to sign constitutional amendments for the legislators to place that on the ballot. So you may have seen the governor kind of posturing himself as going to be the calming influence over the supermajority in both houses, and when it comes to constitutional amendments, that is not the case. They can put anything they want on the ballot, and for those with commercial property in California, that is a very uncomfortable place to be right now because while Proposition 13 for residential properties still remains incredibly popular, there was polling done last week which indicates that doing what is called a split roll for the commercial side is also fairly popular. It polls close to 60% to make the change in the split roll. And because Proposition 13 is what protects that, they would have to go back to the voters to modify it. And they can go back to the voters without the governor's approval. So, and the amount of revenue that would potentially generate for the general fund if you modify, and excuse me, for counties, if you modify Proposition 13 to create a split roll, it's just a phenomenal amount of money, some in the billions of dollars. So I think they'll be looking at that. You will see a lot of constitutional amendments be introduced. We've already seen in the first day of the legislature they introduced 8 or 9. They are still introducing bills. You know, they're kind of trickling in. One that you should be aware of is AB 41, which was introduced 2 days ago. That is the new school facilities bond that we're expecting to see on the 2014 ballot, carried by Assemblymember Buchanan. She's the chair of the Education Committee. So we're going to see some more bonds. We're going to definitely see some constitutional amendments. The other thing that is really something more for Paul and I to worry about, but for those of you that like to watch the Capitol, we really do rely mainly on the adopted rules that they adopted at the beginning of the session. And to change the rules typically takes a 2/3 vote. And when I say rules, I mean when bills have to be introduced, when bills have to be moved out of committee, the amount of time they have to appear in print before they can be voted on. Those all tend to take a 2/3 vote. So all the really controversial things that try and get done at the end of the session really, up until this last year, took Republican consent to do, so you would have some sort of a bipartisan effort. Now, the rules that govern the people that are governing us are sort of all up in the air, because if they really want to do something at the last minute, they have the votes to waive the rules to do something at the last minute, and that part is a little bit concerning because there are so many big ticket items probably coming our way, CEQA reform, things like that normally would get a little bit more of a process because the Republicans would be at the table, and right now, because of the supermajority, the rules themselves are sort of in a state of flux. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to go over a little bit more of what happened and what we're expecting to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Karen had a little more coffee than I did this morning, so we let her go first. So just very briefly, on the deficit, Karen mentioned that the projection is $1.9 billion. I just don't think that's going to be right. The numbers from the previous month that the controller just released indicate that the state's $800 million below what was in the budget projection. So I think there seems to be a consensus downtown that the deficit's probably going to be more in the $4, $5, $6 billion range, but that's certainly, in comparison to $25 billion from previous years or $28 billion in 1 year, sort of pales in comparison to that. On the supermajority, a couple things Karen did mention that we do want to include in the presentation today. On the sort of more run-of-the-mill bills, because there are so many more Democrats now in the legislature, there are absolutely moderate blocks in the Senate and in the Assembly, but because just the overall number of Democrats has increased, some of the bills that, frankly, counties have opposed over the last couple of years, they may be more difficult to derail, as they have been derailed in the last couple of years, just because of the way the election has turned out, quite frankly. And so we're really going to have to be on our toes for that. The supermajority obviously presents a lot of different opportunities for the majority party. One of the things that just want to make sure the board is aware of, the public is aware of, is that Senate Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg has indicated that what he wants to do, first and foremost, really, in terms of putting something on the ballot in 2014, is initiative reform. If that seems a little ironic that there would be an initiative to reform the initiative process, it's okay if you smile at that, but that is in fact what I think we're really looking at in 2013, 2014 is a proposed initiative to reform the initiative process. Looking forward, a lot of the priority items for the county need money, really, to effectuate them, and there are some opportunities, we think. The cap and trade revenues, the revenues that will result to the state by virtue of the voters approving Proposition 39. Those are both avenues through which a lot of projects will be funded in California going forward. Karen touched briefly on the water bond. I want to make sure, again, the board members and the public are aware that The water bond has never pulled well. Well, I should say it hasn't pulled well for quite some time. It still isn't pulling well. As Karen mentioned, there will be a school facilities bond, looks like on the 2014 ballot. People who want to get the water bond passed, I think, view it as being even more difficult than it ever has been, being juxtaposed with another large school facilities bond. And so there is, frankly, some discussion now of a water fee, much more so than I think we've seen in a long time. People that went to the Aqua Conference last week, the Water Agencies Conference, heard discussion, several participants talk about the possibility of a statewide water fee. How that affects the watershed counties, obviously, is something we're going to watch very closely, especially vis-a-vis the rest of the state. But that is something everybody needs to be aware of as a subject for discussion in the legislature in 2013 and 2014. We're proud of the successes for the county in 2012, especially on the redevelopment thing. That was hard, frankly, but in the end, it's going to help this county significantly. We're very happy to be able to, to have helped with that. And so, having given our report, we'll now kick it over to Holland and Knight.
Supervisor Holmes.
I just have a question regarding this, I have to say, ridiculous SRA fee that people are being asked to. It's a fee, and Howard Jarvis is challenging that as it should be identified as a tax.
Right.
Do you think the legislature will go forward and authorize that, since they have a 2/3 majority, and make that a tax, so then their lawsuit goes away?
Yeah, I think that's a very real possibility. First of all, there is pending litigation, and on one hand, the legislature historically, when there's pending litigation, has very often said we don't want to weigh in legislatively until court cases have worked themselves out. On the other hand, there is already one new bill that's been introduced, not specific to the fire fee, but with respect to other fees that some counties levy. Mm-hmm. And the whole purpose of this other bill that has already been introduced is to clarify with the 2/3 majority, once and for all, that that fee is permissible for counties to levy and without a vote of the people. And so I do, Supervisor, I think what you described is a very, very likely possibility in 2013.
I was afraid of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If it please your board, my name is Rich Gold, joined here by my colleague Mike Galano this morning. I'm going to give the kind of broad overview of what's going on at the federal level, and Mike's going to talk specifically about the platform and our work this year. Just starting out on the elections, obviously the House Democrats picked up 9 seats, and I think we have finally counted everybody, so that leaves a House majority for Speaker Boehner and the Republicans of 16 seats as opposed to 25 seats in the current Congress, and a 55-45 margin in the Senate, with the Democrats having picked up 2 seats in the Senate for the next Congress. And obviously at the presidential level, President Obama reelected. That puts us straight into finishing up in our lame duck session what's been referred to as the fiscal cliff. The expiration of the Bush tax cuts, the need to do something about the debt limit again, as well as a handful of other items, and expiration of items that will impact the economy if not dealt with. I'm, as I kind of said coming over here to a friend, I'm much more concerned about the hockey season than I am about the fiscal cliff in terms of it being resolved. I think we're pretty close. The president has a very strong hand to play, given he spent a lot of time talking about the issue in the election. This will mark the first time since the 1970s that the marginal tax rates have gone up. The 2 highest tax rates at the 39 and 35 level from the Clinton era will be coming back, most likely, and what we're spending a lot of time focused on now is the degree to which we'll be cutting spending in addition to doing that, with the major emphasis there on Medicare cuts. And we expect at the end of the day the package to be in the $1.5 trillion or so space, with a significant portion of revenue there of about $1 trillion to $1.2 trillion, Medicare cuts on top of that, and then other spending cuts to go along with. Most of the discretionary spending cuts happened in the summer of 2011. If you recall, with the original debt limit deal, there was $1 trillion in spending cuts in discretionary and defense spending over the 10-year period. So there won't be a lot more happening particularly in accounts that are important to the county, whether it's Corps of Engineers or Interior for permitting purposes or for funding for our conservation activities, or perhaps EPA's state revolving fund for, again, funding for our wastewater project. All those cuts have kind of been baked in, and we're in pretty good shape there. So once we get past this initial precipice, as it's being referred to, we'll spend the next 6 to 9 months of next year going into implementing legislation, which will include most likely both individual and corporate tax reform, as well as specific entities or specific legislative items that can save money, like the reauthorization of the Farm Bill, which is estimated to save between $35 and $40 billion over the 5-year window, so you can double that over a 10-year window. So we'll spend a lot of the beginning of next year doing that. We'll also be working on other items that will be important to the county next year, including, since we only did a 2-year authorization of the federal transportation legislation this summer, we'll actually be starting back up again in 3 to 6 months on the transportation bill, and we have items in there of importance for the county, including Tahoe's transit situation that we'll be working on. We'll have an energy bill, or a series of energy bills moving forward, and we'll need to be watching on impacts on our biomass program there. And obviously a number of other more micro issues in terms of our habitat conservation plan, as well as our wastewater funding. So we'll keep you posted as it moves along. This is my opportunity also to say how important it is and how much we appreciate you coming out to Washington. We know doing it ourselves, it's not an easy trip to make, and we obviously know the taxpayers in the county pay for that at the end of the day. But when you come out, it is not just to see your members of Congress from here, which obviously you can do here. It is because you have so much going on in the federal agencies at this juncture, it's very important for you to be able to come out and talk to staff and senior political folks in those agencies to be able to push forward on the agenda that matters for the people here in the county. And we really appreciate your doing that in February this year once again, and as you come out other times during the year, and just want to remind everybody how critical that is. With that, let me hand it over to Mike on the platform issues.
Thanks, Rich. 2012 has been a very busy and successful year for Placer County in Washington, D.C. As Rich mentioned, in July we enacted a 2-year reauthorization of the Federal Surface Transportation Law. The new law is called MAP 21. And while the law did not contain earmarked funding for projects as it has in prior years, it did contain an extension of the Secure Rural Schools Act, which is an important piece of legislation to the county because it helps provide funding for wildfire prevention and road projects. And as originally drafted, that provision was not contained in MAP 21, but thanks to the hard work of the board and staff and the leadership of Senator Boxer, we were able to get that provision included in conference, which was a pretty heavy lift given how underfunded that bill was. Also on the funding side, we've been very active at the Department of Energy to work to ensure that funding received in prior years for the biomass project is secure as that project moves across the finish line. On the policy front, we've been active at the federal resource agencies to help educate them on the Placer Conservation Plan and the goals of the county for land conservation. At the U.S. EPA, we've been very active on the wastewater project to help secure the flexibility for the state to offer 30-year extended financing for regional sewer projects, and we've also teed up the conversation at the possibility of extending it to 40 years, and we'll continue that conversation next year as well. Looking forward to 2013 opportunities, as Rich noted, with the extension of MAP 21, there will be pots of funding available for local road projects. Unlike prior bills, that money is going to be block granted to the states, and one of the key things there is to make sure the county is correctly positioned in the MPO process to access those funds, and we'll be working with staff going forward to make sure that that happens. Another source of funding we think will be fertile in 2013 is on COPS hiring. As you recall, the county in FY11 was successful in securing $2.6 million to hire 8 new sheriff's deputies We anticipate there'll be another round of funding next year, and we'd encourage the county to apply once again. The very popular Tiger program will come back next year. That stands for Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery. And as Allison noted, we submitted a strong application for the Kings Beach Commercial Core project this year, and at the insistence of DOT in Washington, they've encouraged us to reapply and given us some helpful suggestions on how to improve our cost-benefit analysis there. Some additional items to consider: the Affordable Care Act will continue, despite what you might read in the press. Much of that is already fully funded, so there will be opportunities for the county to pursue funding for wellness programs, for anti-obesity initiatives and anti-smoking initiatives. There is also health clinic funding available for low-income populations. Some broader funding pots that the county is concerned with. While we don't have completed FY13 appropriations bills yet, we have a pretty good sense of which direction the funding is heading, and it looks like the CDBG program, the Community Development Block Grant Program, will be funded at the FY12 level at $2.9 billion, the Home Program at $1 billion, so that funding will remain the same as it did last year. Transportation funding is one area where we'll likely see an increase going forward. We anticipate the transit accounts will both see plus-ups as well as some of the highway accounts. One area that will likely be decreasing is in environmental enforcement. The draft Senate appropriations bill provides a small increase. The House bill, which was passed, contains a 17% cut, so they will likely split the difference in conference, and EPA will likely get an 8% haircut next year. So those are the broad policy initiatives we've been working on in 2012, and a quick look at 2013, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions from the board? Supervisor Holmes.
Thank you for your report. There's, the House has lost how many Republicans? They're down.
The House majority in the current Congress is a 25-seat majority. That will be down to a 16-seat majority in the next Congress starting in 2013.
So there's some leadership positions in the House, particularly on some of the committees. Has there been any changes as far as leadership on those committees?
Not so far. The Republicans have named their leadership in terms of the chairman of the different House committees, and no real major changes of any real import for the county. I should note here, obviously, that Congressman Lundgren won't be returning in the next Congress, and he was very senior on the Homeland Security Committee. So that's a loss in seniority for the region, which will be important. But no other major changes in terms of committees that are of importance to the county.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Euler.
Michael, you mentioned the reduction in the budget on enforcement in EPA. Was that accompanied by a reduction in mandate over which they are supposed to enforce, items over which they are supposed to enforce, or that they're supposed to enforce?
That's a good question. There was some language in the House bill to that effect, but we'll have to keep an eye on the conference report to see what the direction is for Congress on that.
Because without a consistent streamlining of the regulation which they are supposed to enforce, really all we're setting ourselves up for with a reduction in the budget for enforcement is increased time delays for approvals and things along those lines.
That's correct, and that's been an interest in the House side in particular. There have been a number of hearings over the summer on that very issue, so as soon as the 13 bills are completed, we'll get a report to the board on that issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none.
So unless there are any other questions, staff is requesting these three actions: to adopt the platform, to approve the 2 advocacy contracts, and to authorize the board members to travel to Washington, D.C. in February.
Supervisor Duran.
Yes, I just wanted to comment, Allison, I really appreciated the fact that we got the legislative platform out in time enough for all of us to digest it. Really appreciate that very much.
You're welcome.
Is there any member of the public who has any comment on the legislative platform? This is a public document. This is your opportunity to comment. Okay, seeing none. Allison, on the legislative platform, I would like to pull proposal number 5 for individual discussion. Otherwise, I'm comfortable with the rest of the proposal and the platform. Okay. So this is a proposal to modify laws that limit CalPERS retirement options affecting new hires. I am not comfortable with this proposal, and so wanted to just take it separately from action on the rest of the ledge platform. I would be, the proposal essentially would create a situation where we would be advocating to support or sponsor legislation and policy to allow Placer County to discontinue enrollment of any new employees into the CalPERS system. I can't support this as written. I really do see this as the camel's nose under the tent. If we were to craft some language that made it at the discretion of the employee, I would be very comfortable moving forward on this, but would ask the indulgence of my board that we take this item separately. Supervisor Euler.
I move approval of the legislative platform absent proposal number 5.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Madam Chair, I move approval of proposal number 5.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Any abstentions? Thank you. All right. Let us move to our advocacy contracts.
Move approval of staff recommendation to contracts this second.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that carries. And we'll move to the third, authorizing members of Board of Supervisors to travel to Washington, D.C.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much, Allison, and thank you very much to both sets of advocates. All right, we will now move to our 10:15 a.m. timed item. This is the Community Development Resource Agency and Planning item relating to the orchard at Penryn. If you're here, there are some additional seats available up front if you wanted to come have a seat. We do have comfy seating for everyone. Please come on forward and have a seat. So this will be our third meeting on this item. This was and is a public hearing. We did close the public hearing at the end of our last meeting. We also directed staff to work with the project applicant to come forward with potentially some new direction. What I am going to do is reopen the public hearing on this, but I am going to reopen it only to CDRA, the Community Development Resource Agency, to the two appellants, and to the project applicant, the proponent. This is not going to be an opportunity for public comment. I think we've had over 6 hours of public comment on this item, and I think the board is fairly clear where the public stands on this. So I am going to note that staff incorporates by reference the full staff report and all attachments considered by the board at its October 11, 2012 and November 6, 2012 public hearings. And having said that, I will turn it over to E.J. Evaldi.
Thank you. I'll wait for the screen to drop before I begin. All right, so I'll get started while they get the PowerPoint going. But as you mentioned, following direction from the board, the applicant went back and made some changes to the site plan to address some of the concerns that were raised during the hearing. Staff has reviewed these changes as detailed in your staff report and also provided additional clarification on a number of issues brought up at the previous board hearing. I'm going to provide a brief summary of these issues, and then I'll turn it over to the project applicant to provide an overview of the recent project revisions. That's part of the PowerPoint. So up on the screen are some of the kind of a list of general issues raised during the appeal hearings. Staff maintains that the Orchard at Penryn project is consistent with both the Horseshoe Bar Penryn Community Plan and the underlying zone district on the project site. The community development element in the Horseshoe Bar Penryn Community Plan clearly identifies multifamily residential as an allowed use under the Penryn Parkway land use designation. And the Penryn Parkway definition clearly states the implementing zoning will provide the mechanism the parkway will need to reach its development potential. The site is zoned to allow up to 212 multifamily residential units. Although the applicant is proposing fewer units at 150, your board, in hearing these appeals, has the discretion to decide whether or not 150 units are appropriate for the site. There's also the community design element in the Horseshoe Bar Penryn Community Plan, which contains development policies specific to the Penryn Parkway area, including the often mentioned reference to Policy D, which states that development shall be of relatively low density, low profile type. Staff maintains that this is simply a reference to the placement and visual appearance of buildings as it resides in the community design chapter of the community plan. As mentioned earlier, the actual density permitted under each land use classification is clearly defined in the community development element of the plan. Traffic impacts in Loomis would remain significant and unavoidable on a cumulative level, even with the town's recently adopted resolution indicating its intent to cooperate with the county in a traffic fee sharing agreement. And this is for two reasons. The first of which is there is no identified mechanism by which the county can guarantee that a fair share payment made by the project applicant would be used to implement the specific improvements needed at the Taylor Road, King Road intersection. And secondly, improvements at the Taylor Road Horseshoe Bar intersection would not be feasible because there is not enough right-of-way available. The staff report provides additional background and clarification regarding the reference to 9 new vehicle trips on Taylor Road. To summarize, while there could be up to 35 new Del Oro High School students generated by the proposed project, not all of those students would be expected to arrive at or leave the school individually in a vehicle that travels on Taylor Road during the school peak hour. Given the other available transportation options, including alternative routes, it is reasonable to assume that the proposed project would generate the 9 new trips on Taylor Road that were estimated in the traffic impact study during the peak hour. As far as the bus service, the EIR did not find that the project would cause a significant impact related to public transit, so a bus stop was not required as part of the EIR. However, the project is being conditioned to provide a bus stop along Penryn Road. The nearest public transportation route is the Taylor Road Shuttle, and that could include service to and from the project site in the future. In regards to the floodplain issue, the project site contains 2 drainage swells, both of which carry water intermittently. These are not FEMA mapped floodplains, but they do have a 100-year floodplain just like any other waterway. The proposed on-site infrastructure is designed to accommodate the modeled stormwater flows without increasing the 100-year floodplain on the adjacent properties. The project would also meet the county's requirements for on-site stormwater detention. There was a question raised about whether soil remediation would be necessary if areas were left undeveloped on site. For example, if an area with contaminated soil was incorporated into an open space area, the contamination would not need to be cleaned up if the area was fenced off to prevent people from going into those areas. However, if the development is implemented as currently proposed, full remediation of the project site would be required. And then lastly, the staff report provides a detailed response to the question about whether 4 other projects were included in the cumulative analysis in the EIR, specifically Lifehouse Church, Turkey Creek Estates, Rockland Crossings, and the Swetzer Business Park. Lifehouse Church was included in the cumulative condition as part of the build-out of the community plan. The other projects were not included based on either distance and or geography and physical separation from the project site. That concludes what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to put up a slide of the revised site plan. And then there's also a preliminary landscape plan, which is a colored plan after this slide that shows more or less what is being proposed. I'm going to invite the applicant up to the podium now to give you an overview of those changes.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Marcus Leduca, Leduca & Avdis, 3200 Douglas Boulevard in Roseville, on behalf of the applicant and property owner. After our last meeting on November 6th, our project team went back to the site plan to see how we could address your primary concerns regarding screening the project from adjacent land uses, as well as addressing clustering and massing of buildings nearest our immediate neighbors. We believe the revised site plan that has been submitted to the board addresses the direction of the board on November 6th, as well as comments from our immediate neighbors to provide a buffer to their properties. I'd like to clear up a couple items before reviewing that revised site plan. There seem to be a couple of misconceptions out there that I wanted to address that came up in the hearing, and we've seen them on occasion in written comments. The first is that the project is a walled community, that basically there's a solid wall around it. It is not. It is open wrought iron fencing. There will be very thick landscaping completely around the site to, in essence, provide a green barrier to views, but it is not walled. The second was a comment regarding that the project is flattening the entire site relative to grading. Nearest to the Upples home and also to the Federoffs, significant areas are being preserved in the natural state with rock outcroppings and some large oak tree clusters that are being kept in their state right now. So I just want to make sure that that was addressed for members of the public as well. The focus of our efforts has really been reducing massing or eliminating buildings near our neighbors who have commented on the project, and also redoing our landscape plan to make sure that the green buffer on the site plan extends completely around the boundaries of the site with a focus on fast-growing evergreens. So if I could start around the site, and I don't know if we could put up the landscape plan, EJ, or not, as opposed to the site plan. Oh, right, this?
There you go.
Okay. As you can see, I'll start in the northwest portion of the site, nearest the Upples home right here. In the relative to landscaping, we've added landscaping to address an area that had a bit of a gap relative to views to the southeast here of the recreation building. Prior to the Planning Commission hearing, after a meeting with the Upples, these two buildings here had actually been sixplexes. One was fronting on their backyard and one was fronting on their garage. Prior to the Planning Commission hearing and in the site plan you had before, we completely removed the sixplex building here adjacent to the yard, and now it's just a side-on threeplex nearest their garage. So again, the idea was to address massing. We've already done that prior to what the board actually reviewed in November. With regard to the Federoffs, the site plan approved by the Planning Commission and previously presented to your board, there was an open area right here that, again, is actually, you can't see anything because this is a landscape plan, but there's a significant oak tree grove here and rock outcroppings that were preserved. But it also had two sixplex buildings fronting on the front yard and then toward the road right here. There was also some landscaping gaps to the southeast and southwest. What we've done now is rotate these two buildings so they're only side-ons to the front. So there's now, and we've removed the building completely over the front yard, and landscaping has been added to the southeast view, south and southwest view. So there's now a green buffer along this entire length, and then the continuation of the oak preserve here is also continuing on throughout here, so which also provides views to the blocking views to the southeast for the Federoffs and to the southwest of the Federoffs and southeast for the Upples. With regard to Hope Lutheran Church, at your last hearing, there were comments received from a member of the school. We had two sixplex buildings fronting on this church property. One was fronting on the playground, one was fronting on the parking lot, and there were some gaps in landscaping here at the property line. What we've done is, there were comments, maybe we could make something one-story fronting the playground area. What we've done instead is completely remove that building. Both sixplexes are gone. There is now a threeplex that sides on the parking lot, and now the landscaping has been enhanced along this entire route here relative to a boundary with the school and church property. Regarding Penman Road, when we looked at the site plan that you have both here and also now, that was already screened up until the point where you get very close to the exact entrance right here. We couldn't add more trees or tall shrubs there because you suddenly create line of sight safety issues for vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. If you put heavy landscaping right at this point or this point, you won't be able to see until they're right on top of you. So we kept the landscaping there, which already created a visual barrier from the roadway along these lines right here. In terms of clustering buildings, and I don't know if we have the site plan from 2007, EJ, which one that is? I don't know what slide that is. Additional slides, okay. This was the June 18, 2007 site plan, which was actually there was one iteration just past this with only minor tweaks that was attached to the initial study in 2007. As you can see, buildings line the entire site all the way around. No central swale was preserved, roadway right through. No clustering of buildings whatsoever. The Federoffs had the pool right near their, right south of their house. There was no preservation of the oak tree groves on the site, and there was also no preservation of rock outcroppings. Now, if I could get back to the site plan that is before you today. After 2007, the comments from staff relative to clustering, it's exactly what my clients did. They pulled buildings into 4 pods around the site. Here, they preserved areas of rock outcroppings and oak trees, central swale, and again, these are all distinctive architecture in terms of the materials, colors for those 4 pods, pulled them away and created that issue of clustering relative to massing. With the latest site plan, the idea was for the 3 folks who had commented in terms of immediately adjacent buildings, was to eliminate or sharply reduce the massing of buildings. So not just putting up a landscape screen, but also going from 6plex fronting on those properties to either removal of the buildings themselves, such as here, here, and here, and also side-on of a 3plex. We also, again, as part of that, in response to staff's comments, added there's green recreation areas and passive open space areas added throughout the site, and those are interior, as is much of the parking. So you don't have a situation like you'll see typically in multifamily projects where you have carports along the edge of the property adjacent to the uses. Here, that's not the case. Those are pulled down, and you basically have greenscape around the edge of the property, and the parking is internal. We believe that the redesign project in front of you addresses the key concerns that were raised on November 6th, while still maintaining a viable project consistent with what is permitted by the property zoning and community plan designations. Therefore, we would ask you today for your approval of the project as presented based on the findings in your board packet. Project team is here to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for the board? Supervisor Holmes.
Can you go over the recreational amenities? I know you've got a pool. Is there a park there and a spa? And
I will probably ask Mike Mahoney to go over the details if you have questions, if he could. Mike?
Okay.
Hi, Mike Mahoney with the applicant. What was the specific question?
Well, the recreational amenities, you've got a pool there, you've got a exercise area. Is there a park facility in this proposal as well?
There's on-site open space, and there's a tot lot down at the southwest quadrant of the site.
Okay. That's right there. Okay. And how big is that? Is that
I can't answer that right now.
But there's a pool, there's also exercise, a gymnasium, a gym.
Yeah, there will be,
facilities.
within the building, there will be a fitness center, there will be kind of what we call a cyber cafe. Outside on the pool deck area, there's recreation areas, there's an elevated area for barbecue, there's a spa area.
So there'll be amenities for families to have barbecues and kids to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Supervisor Duran?
Yeah, question, will those amenities only be available to the community in this development, or are you open to some type of membership? Just for the development, okay. How much, since our last meeting, you've done considerable amount of work and staff time. Can you put a dollar figure on what the applicant has spent putting all this together?
Probably in the $25,000 range. Our landscape architect, there's been various iterations, and they would come up with something, we'd say there's still a gap here, or we need to look at it this way, and so it went, and then the architect had to get involved, and the engineer. A lot of folks, a lot of moving parts. It wasn't just a matter of coloring something differently on the computer. There's a lot that goes with that.
And you, Marcus, you also mentioned that you had met with the appellant on this?
Yeah, we met on Friday with one of the appellants, Mr. Uppel. And then late yesterday, Mr. Skiff met with the principal of the school and showed him the revised site plan, and he was, as my understanding was very pleased at the change in this area right here.
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Was or wasn't?
Was.
Okay. Thank you.
Supervisor Euler?
Yeah, when you were flipping through the slides, we saw some kind of a representation from some kind of view that looked like off-site looking on-site. Would you?
Yeah. These are views, because one of the questions that came up.
That one doesn't show me much.
The next, I'm sorry.
There's one more, I think. No, where did we go past it the other way? Oh, it's the other way. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
It was EJ that was doing the flipping at that time. My apologies.
Yeah, they don't usually trust me with this thing. This is a representation because the question came up looking at the Upples. So we took as an example, looking from the corner of their property, which has their garage, and also from their pool deck, their outdoor living area, because their concern, and again, their key concern was what they look at to the southeast. Right now, there's an oak grove, and so the question was, that will be preserved, but what will they really see? And so the question was, we try to look at views that are not only proposed landscaping, but also some of the existing trees that we're keeping. For example, there are some that are right on the property line. Those aren't going to be cut down. You maneuver your fence around those because they're very mature trees and that kind of thing. So the idea was this will be the view. Is this day one? It's not day one. There will be significant landscaping planted at the beginning, but it'll look like this. We're looking at in 3 to 5 years relative to the amount of landscaping. You could plant more trees and try to get it closer to this, and all that means is 3 to 5 years you're taking half of it out, because otherwise the trees and the shrubs will crowd each other and they won't survive. So it's sort of a sometimes people get rather upset when you start tearing things out that were planted. But that literally what the view will be from our landscape architect.
And Mr. LaDuca, you say this is 3 to 5 years in the future, this landscaping?
Yep.
And are these the actual plant materials that are proposed to be planted?
Yes, the landscape architect used his, I don't know if we have a view. Okay. Yeah, the plan, we have a handout I could provide to you, but it is the actual, we said, you got to plant what's going to be there as opposed to just what might look nice on a picture. It's like, are these part of the actual palette of plants that we...
And I'm just wondering, because you said evergreens in your presentation, and I only see some evergreens.
Yeah, some. I mean, not all. I mean, there'll be a variety of trees planted, but there won't just be, evergreens, for example.
Mm-hmm. And what are, and forgive me if I dwell on this a little bit, we've just gone through a very similar issue relating to landscaping up in the Tahoe area that still weighs on my mind. What would the size and number roughly of these plants be? How many gallons are we proposing, and how many?
They differ depending on the plants. I don't know, Mike, if you have I don't have the full landscape plans. Depending, some are shrubs. Those are some size, and there's also trees that are in, much larger size, and there's a combination. If you plant them all and you plant them too close together, that creates an issue. But let me get the plant palette. I have it here.
Madam Chair, if I may indulge you to after we have Mr. LaDuca answer that question, if I could ask a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yep.
A lot of the trees are 24-inch box.
24-inch
box trees. Yeah, so they're larger planting. They, the other, smaller trees catch up after a certain period of time, but they're much larger at the beginning.
So 2 foot by 2 foot.
Yes.
Okay, and then for those that come in pots, 5-gallon, 10-gallon, 1 gallons,
15.
15s.
I think I gave them all away, but I could pass this to the clerk and have it passed around. These are the kind of trees we're looking at in terms of the...
Supervisor Duran?
Yes, I would like to...
Jack, could you turn your microphone on, please?
I would like to ask Mr. Uppel a couple of questions about these representations, if you would, please. Mr. Uppel, are these representations fair and accurate from your perspective?
These representations were presented to me on Friday in the meeting with the applicant. They are 3 to 5 years from now. Okay. My concern is there's been no supervision 3 to 5 years from now. So we're assuming that this may come into play, but it just may not. Okay. Then what do we do?
Hypothetically, if they would come into play, as you say, would this give you some comfort?
I think the applicant has attempted to do some work on screening, which we really appreciate. But screening wasn't the only issue. There's going to be an issue with noise. There's going to be an issue with contiguous land use. So there are some other issues that still need to be considered by the board today.
All right. Thank you very much.
Was there more, Marcus, that you had for us?
Yeah, I just had clarified the trees along the perimeter are all going to be evergreens. Some of the deciduous trees will be internal to the site, and you can see from the overall landscape plan, if I can get back to that. Trees in the interior, more the deciduous trees. Where the thing's not working. But on the perimeter, it's all evergreens.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board for the applicant? Okay, at this time I'd like to offer each of the appellants 10 minutes to come forward and present your side of the discussion. Rick, did you want to start?
Sure, 10 minutes, awful generous. Madam Chair, members of the supervisors, happy holidays. Welcome back again. Loomis, obviously the issue of zoning consistency, the consistency with the community plan, your design elements, the height, the parking, the drainage, all of that is in your hands. It's not an issue for Loomis. That's your decision. Obviously, you need to make peace that it meets all of that. Our requests are going to be fairly simple and can be handled by you today in review of the project. Basically, our concerns boil down to traffic when it all gets done and said, and I think they've obviously made some good efforts on addressing some of the concerns that you expressed and the public expressed. First, we had talked and requested the emergency ingress, egress onto Taylor Road. For some reason, we're still where we were in the very beginning, where it's going to be an exit only, no ingress, but it's more the exits that concern us on a 50-mile-an-hour road. And again, that can be conditioned to make an emergency ingress, egress for police, safety, fire, etc. Not a very large issue. EJ talked a little bit about the payment of the fair share of the funds, which, believe me, in this instance is fairly minuscule. But the overall issue of partnering with Loomis is huge. Because, we want to implement the mitigation measures which have been pointed out in EIRs for surrounding projects of our jurisdiction. I'm sure all of you have that kind of same feeling with areas that you particularly represent. The issue is as stated in the staff report, there's no mechanism in place, even though the town unanimously adopted a resolution saying we would earmark the funds. They're only to be used for mitigation as identified in this EIR or any other project, etc. The mechanism I assume you're talking about is the MOU between the county and Loomis, which I might state has been with the county in the county's hands for 4 months and has been placed on hold until the outcome of this particular appeal is determined, which is almost, we're not going to move forward and we're going to kind of slap your hand until we get through this appeal. Then we'll take up your MOU and consider being a partner. I was kind of hoping it was moving along, but apparently not. So I don't think, and your legal counsel can surely advise on this, that there would be anything illegal in conditioning that the fair share portion of the mitigation fee be given to Loomis. And again, if they can tell you the amount, it's pretty minuscule, but it starts that stepping stone, and that's what I want to be here and accomplish, is start our partnership. And then finally, I think Supervisor Euler mentioned before, and I think it was very correct, that with the bus stop on Penryn Road, I would encourage that the board, should they approve this project and it be developed, that you encourage the PCTPA at a future date to take a look at putting some routes which would travel down Penryn Road and pick it up, because obviously placing them there now, they're not going to get any use, and we don't have enough money to be throwing operation money to areas that we're not getting the big bang for the buck. So essentially that's our position, or at least my position on it, and thank you again. I know this has been a long, arduous journey for you, and good luck. Happy holidays.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Angelosi before he sits down? Too late, he sat down. All right, I see no questions. Thank you, Rick. Bobby, did you want to come forward?
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for allowing us to bring this project to your attention again. I'm sure you probably have had enough of this by now. I want to start off my comments by saying, first of all, I do thank the applicant for making modifications and addressing some of the issues. However, I don't think all the issues have actually been adequately addressed. I did ask for a meeting with the applicant along with staff and other members of the board to try and iron out some of these issues ahead of this hearing so we could all have come to a compromise. The applicant did refuse that meeting, but I did still meet with them on Friday, and I listened to their proposals as to landscape and screening. Though I see they have made some modifications in terms of the buildings, numbers, and placement, I don't believe the public has had an opportunity to review or respond to these changes on whether they are significant to actually cure the EAR's shortcomings. The board would be violating CEQA and appellant's right to procedural due process to deny your appeal and approve a new, different version of the project that has been modified to address the EIR's inadequacies. Whether you've not been provided with meaningful opportunity to comment, or whether the new design actually addresses or resolves the issues raised by the public regarding the county's failure to prepare an EIR that complies with CEQA's information disclosure and environmental protection mandates. So I would request that we allow this to come back to the public to review the amended plan and have further input as and when necessary. As far as the staff comments are concerned, I did prepare a document that I would like to hand it out to the board. And this memorandum merely defines some of the inadequacies where we feel that the questions that were raised by the public and were put forward to the board on subsequent hearings have not adequately been addressed. And so rather than go through each of those individually, I'll leave that for your proposal to go through and review. The last point that I would like to bring up is that the whole contiguous land use and screening issue. 15-gallon trees, 24 by 24-inch box trees, 3 to 5 years. These are all unknowns, and if the board were to approve this project, there would need to be some kind of control process in place that says that once this has been approved, that 3 to 5 years from now, we actually would get that screening. I think 3 to 5 years is a long period of time to have to be staring out and looking at boxes less than 30 feet from your property line. So I think that is still an issue that isn't adequately addressed so far by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Uppel before he sits down? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, Supervisor Euler, I'm sorry.
The parcel which you acquired when? When we met, you told me. I apologize.
Back in 2004.
Okay, and that parcel was created when, do you recall?
It was, I don't know the exact dates, but I believe it was, the parcel had been created back in 2001.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I see no other questions. Thank you, Bobby. EJ or Michael, anything on your end that you wanted to recap or wrap up with before we bring it back to the board?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that there is condition number 4 of approval requires that this project, if it is approved, to go through an extensive design review process, which looks at, site design, landscaping, lighting, parking, everything. So that would be a separate process. That would be internal to the Planning Services Division with the Development and Review Committee. So I just want to make note of that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, quick comment on that.
Supervisor Euler.
And EJ, to Mr. Uppel's concern about what's on the plan versus what actually gets planted, what enforcement does the county have to make sure that the adopted landscape plan actually gets implemented?
We commonly have agreements, up to 5 years to make sure that the landscaping does survive. That is something we can do with this project as well, if that's a big concern.
And the landscape plan as submitted has to actually be implemented as submitted, otherwise we withhold certificates of occupancy until it's done, correct?
That's correct. And what you're seeing now is a preliminary landscape plan. That does not even show even close to the detail what we as staff would require when we review it.
Understood. So just to his concern about whether or not it actually gets put in, staff and the county certainly has a mechanism to enforce what gets installed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Supervisor Holmes.
And EJ, what can you give me some kind of a time frame as far as design review? How long that process would take?
It all depends on when plans are submitted. We're going to require detailed, site plans, landscaping plans. So once it's submitted, we usually have a 30-day review period. When often we have comments, it may add another 30 days. So it could be up to 60 days or longer to get through that process.
So it'll be up to negotiations with the applicant throughout that process.
Correct.
Make sure that the conditions are met properly.
Correct.
Any other questions from the board on this? Okay. We're being asked to consider the third-party appeals. We have done that, so I am now going to close the public hearing on this once again and bring this back to the board, either for any additional clarifying questions or any comments that the board would like to make on this before we take action on 4 different agenda items. We're being asked, just so everyone is clear here, to deny the third-party appeal filed by Rick Angelisi on behalf of the town of Loomis. We're being asked to deny the third-party appeal filed by Bobby Uppel on behalf of the Stop 150 Apartments Group. We're being asked to certify the final environmental impact report, including the final errata. And we're being asked, as part of that action, to adopt the statement of findings and overriding considerations and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan. And last, we're being asked to uphold the action of the Planning Commission and approve the vesting tentative subdivision map and conditional use permit on this project. Before we move to action on this, I do have some comments. I commend the project proponents for the changes they have made, but frankly don't feel that they go far enough to address my concerns, which I have been very clear about expressing throughout this long discussion. EJ, do you have the clicker there? If we can get, I think it was slide number 11, which showed the 2007 plan. There it is. This plan, the 2007 plan, is certainly not perfect, and that was that was made clear in the comments that our planning director made at the time as related to this proposal. His concerns about this plan, I think, were valid, but what strikes me is that it frankly does not differ markedly from the proposal that's in front of us. It does differ in some substantive and important ways. The open space is slightly different. The alignments are slightly different. But to me, the thing that actually makes the 2007 plan a better plan as it relates to the larger community is that how much farther it is off the fence line, which gets to the issue that Supervisor Wygant raised at our last meeting about that buffer. I think I don't want to interpret Supervisor Wygant's comments, but when he used the term buffer, I did not mean that necessarily just to mean landscaping and what plants were going to be planted, but the distance from the actual property line on this. So I would say that I still hold that there is a hybrid of the 2007 plan and the 2012 plan at a somewhat reduced density, which, as EJ pointed out, we do have the discretion to reduce density and approval on this. Somewhere in the 120 to 130 range would be something that I could certainly live with, because I think it could get to those buffer concerns that I had and continue to have. And so, just so we're very clear, I'm not going to be able to approve the revised site plan in front of us today, nor, however, would I approve the 2007 plan. I think there's a hybrid of those two plans that could really get to achieving the developer's goals and the community's goals, and I just don't see it in front of us today. Supervisor Duran.
Yes, I want to thank everybody for participating in this endeavor and in the subsequent hearings that we've had. We've heard a lot of information. Hopefully all of you feel that you've been part of the process and that you've provided your comments, and they've been very substantive, and I know I've listened to them. I've read every email and letter that's been mailed to the Board of Supervisors. This is a very difficult decision, and it also is a decision that's based on, property rights, and those are real important to everyone here in Placer County. I have and respectfully, I disagree with the chair with regards to, what the responsibilities are here. And as I said at our last meeting, I was ready to go and approve that plan, but out of deference to some board members that wanted to take a look and see if there was another way that we can kind of make this a little bit more palatable, I was willing to do that. It does look different, in my opinion, but I think the exercise was basically trying to move deck chairs around a cruise ship. But if it makes some folks feel better, I was willing to do that. And I want to commend both Mr. Uppel and the applicant for being able to sit down and talk about the issues. And I would have hoped that you would have sat down quite a few years ago when this plan was coming through, so we wouldn't have to go through what we've gone through. But I think it's made us more knowledgeable about each other, about your concerns for the community, your concerns about how we interpret the community plan, and how we make our decisions here at the Board of Supervisors. So, thank you.
Supervisor Holmes.
Thank you, Supervisor Duran. You mentioned that this is a difficult decision. You ought to see it from my perspective. I've listened to the community, several hearings, the 2007 site plan, I was at that hearing. The issue for me comes right down, as you stated, Supervisor Duran, property rights. The zoning has remained consistent since 1981. And the property's changed hands, the zoning remained with the property. It remained in the 1988 revision of the Horseshoe Bar Community Plan and in 1994 General Plan. I don't feel that it's I don't have the ability to downzone someone's property unless they actually request it. And no one's ever requested that, even when the property changed hands from owner to owner. I think that the applicant has done everything they can to make this project feasible. It's going to go through design review. There'll be further conscientious revision to the plan. Again, it pains me to have to do this because I know I'm not going to make any friends, but I'm going to have to support this plan as it's proposed.
Supervisor Euler?
You know, interestingly, as we look at this entire document, this entire community plan, that staff spent the better part of 5 years working on, having directed, the board having directed our staff prior to my arrival on the board as a result of the 92 election. And then staff, of course, came back and updated our board as they did the Planning Commission as this was moving along. The entire conversation comes down to 3 words, and those 3 words are relatively low density, and how one group of people reads those 3 words versus another group of people reads those 3 words. And when you look at relatively low density, you think one thing, but when you put it in the context of the plan as designed, when you understand that it's in the design element of the plan, not the development element, which assigns the land use, when you keep it in the context of what immediately precedes it, the 7 or 8 paragraphs that talk about the Penryn Parkway and what's intended within the Penryn Parkway, and how you go about achieving that through clustering commercial uses in this area that's zoned for this use. I have to sit here and I have to say, okay, if it's really an interpretation of that relatively low density threshold from a design standpoint within the design element, not talking about the land use side of it, because nobody's argued that. Nobody's argued that from a land use standpoint, from a zoning standpoint, this use is allowed at this intensity. Nobody's questioned that. The question is, does the design element and the incorporation of those 3 words in the design element, does that somehow supersede the zoning? And I have to say, we have the words of our former planning director who led the entire effort to do the plan. We have the words of our current planning director and staff. We have my personal recollection as probably the only person in this room that was here in 1994 when we adopted this plan. In fact, I made the motion to adopt this plan. We have one interpretation of what the intent of this parkway was, and then we have another interpretation which doesn't seem to see it that way. The parkway and the language about the parkway, I believe, with the exception of those 3 words, I believe very clearly reflects our board in 1994, our stated intent to cluster all of the commercial, the high-density residential opportunities where services were impact less than 1% of the total land use of the planned area, and cluster all of that impact right in the area around the freeway so as to keep 99% plus of the planned area rural. That was the intent of the board, and I can say that as the person who made the motion to approve this plan. And so, as Supervisor Duran stated, you know, there have been changes since 1994. Mr. Uppel, I'm sorry that you moved into a planning area that allows this if you didn't understand it. But to me, it kind of sounds a little bit like the old airport syndrome, where somebody moves into an area where there's an airport and an existing use that's permitted, and then they want to change that existing use. And I don't see that that's fair to somebody who bought a piece of property with an entitled zoning that has ridden with the property for 31 years. And so I, like a couple of my colleagues, will be siding on the side of the person who bought the property as zoned and is simply asking this board for permission to fulfill what was the original intent of the plan that we adopted.
Supervisor Wygant.
Just reiterating a little bit, I guess my comments from last time clearly has been articulated today. The project is provided for in the community plan. Zoning is unarguable that it's allowed. The question is that area in between as it relates to the verbiage in the Penryn Parkway talking about how the project fits or not as it relates to the surrounding neighbors. And obviously in the last hearing I had some serious concerns about whether or not the project had done enough to comply with that, and you could argue all day, I guess, whether or not there could be modifications, and I'm sure there could be further modifications that make the project a better fit, but I don't know how far we could go or what that would look like to make it perfect in a perfect world, because I think to some extent any kind of high-density use in here is going to be of concern to the existing property owners. So I appreciate the fact that folks met and communicated and tried to have those exchange. I appreciate some of the renditions that were given to me by the applicant to show what the landscaping would look like. And obviously there are 3 votes for this project, and I'm going to vote for it. The point, there are a couple of points I want to make. One is for staff as we go through the design review guidelines, I want to be very confident that in fact we're going to enforce all of that in explicit detail. I want to make sure that the public has appropriate access to make sure that if they have concerns, even after landscaping is put in place and it does or does not function, that they have access to the process to make sure that we enforce those conditions appropriately. And I also want to comment on the request by the town of Loomis. Over the years, the county's been the recipient of lawsuits by the town as it relates to not having a memorandum of understanding as it relates to traffic issues and other impacts, in fact. So I don't know exactly what happened, why that stalled, but in fact I would sure rather see that kind of agreement in place as compared to what we've seen in the past. So if there are opportunity, it sounds like the financial impact is not significant as it relates to the request by the town of Loomis for the traffic impacts. You can argue within bands as to what those impacts are, but the traffic mitigation models will pretty much tell us what those impacts are. I would encourage our staffs on both sides to try to find resolution on that question, both as relates to this project and especially for the future. That kind of a relationship is far more constructive and beneficial to all of us. And that's the extent of my comments.
Supervisor Euler.
Madam Chair, I would move that we deny both third-party appeals that were submitted, that we certify the final environmental impact report, including the final errata for the Orchard Penryn project, and I want to specify the November 21st revised site plan project. That we adopt the statements of finding and overriding considerations, adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, and that we uphold the action of the Planning Commission, approve the vesting tentative map and conditional use permit to allow for the construction of the Orchard at Penryn project, which includes 150 multifamily residential units on-site recreational facilities based on the findings set forth in the staff report.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you all very much for participating in the process. I think we should go to closed session again, Jerry. Can we go to closed session again?
It's really your call if you want to do that now. Yeah, we can always or take action.
Okay.
We could do 5, 6, 7, 8.
All right. Okay. Once everyone is filed out, we will move to our departmental items, starting with our Administrative Services Department. Okay, we're moving now to item 5A, Administrative Services Order. I speak English. Administrative Services, Purchase Order Probation. Brett Wood presenting.
Good morning, Chairwoman.
Good morning.
Supervisors. We're here today for a few items with regard to making some radio purchases from Motorola. And with me is Mr. Ben Bramer from the Procurement Services Division. I'm going to turn the presentation over to him.
Morning, Madam Chair, Honorable Board. I'm here to present the recommendations to approve the award of a purchase order with Motorola Solutions for Project 25 mobile and portable radio units, and the approval of a change order to the countywide blanket purchase order with Motorola Solutions for the purchase of Motorola brand radios and related equipment. To meet the Federal Communication Commission's narrowbanding requirements and to migrate the probation department onto the county's new digital radio network, the probation department has submitted a request to purchase Motorola brand Project 25 radio units in a total amount of $313,594. The request has been reviewed and approved by the Telecommunications Division, and Motorola has provided pricing based on the Los Angeles County contract, which includes an additional factory discount of $400 per each unit. The county's contracted with Motorola Solutions in the past, and the vendors familiar with the county's radio network infrastructure, our programming, and our radio configuration. We've researched the option to solicit the equipment through a competitive process. However, Motorola has indicated that the radio equipment must be purchased directly through them in order to receive the factory discount. This discount will result in a potential savings of $22,800 for the county. At this time, Procurement Services is also requesting approval of a change order to the countywide Motorola blanket purchase order. This blanket purchase order was executed in July of this year in the amount of $50,000. Procurement's now recommending that an additional $100,000 be added to the BPO in order to accommodate new digital radio purchases. The county departments such as the Sheriff's Department, Probation, Facilities, and Public Works may purchase off this BPO, and they're responsible for budgeting accordingly for their purchases. So again, at this time, we're requesting the board's approval to authorize the purchasing manager to execute the PO and change order resulting from these recommendations. If you have any other questions.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, the only question I have is that I didn't see the savings in the memorandum, so in the future, if you could include that, that's the very, very positive information. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And Ben, thank you very much for the presentation. Is the $313,594 for the purchase of just the 57 radios?
Yes.
Okay, so the change order where you're asking to increase the maximum amount by $100,000, the 57 radios are included within that?
No. The change orders, the probation purchase order is, right now it's budgeted as a fixed asset. So in order to keep it separate for record keeping, we're going to issue a separate purchase order for that equipment. And then the change order to the Motorola BPO is just to kind of increase the amount, for future purchases.
Okay, and are these handhelds, or when you say mobile or portable, they're mounted within a car? They're handhelds?
Yeah, both mounted in.
And what is, how much do these cost per unit?
Oh, roughly $6,000.
And forgive my ignorance, but is that a fairly standard amount for a radio?
Yes, for these new digital radios for the Project 25 or P25 radios.
And what is the expected life of these? I mean, at what point do we think we're going to have to replace them?
I don't know that answer right now.
Okay. Any other questions from the board on this item? We're discussing the purchase of the Motorola radios. Any questions from Supervisor Euler or Wygant? No? All right. What's the pleasure of the board? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Move to item 6, Community Development Resource Agency Planning. This is a modification of the Riolo Vineyard Specific Plan Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program. Michael Johnson presenting.
Good morning. Michael Johnson with the Community Development Resource Agency. The proposal before the board this morning is a request to allow for the off-site provision of affordable housing for the Riolo Vineyard Specific Plan. Here's a site plan showing where the Riolo Vineyard Specific Plan is located out in the western part of Placer County. And here's a site plan for the specific plan. The specific plan was approved back in 2009 and is set forth in the development agreement for the project. The project is required to set aside 10% of all housing as affordable housing. Based upon the residential units that the project proponent will be constructing, a condition of approval was included that required 54 units be provided on the high-density site located at the northeast corner of PFE Road and Watt Avenue, located right here. Looking at the current market conditions and the absorption rate for residential projects here in not only Placer County but in the region, staff has concluded that the 400th building permit, which is the trigger for the construction of the affordable housing, will not be constructed for another 10 to 15 years. In looking at the realities of the region's residential market, the applicant approached the county to look and see if there were alternative ways to meet the affordable housing requirement for the specific plan. They met with Acres of Hope, who is a faith-based renewal center currently operating out of Applegate, and it was concluded that this might be an option for the project applicant to pursue to meet its affordable housing needs. Currently, Acres of Hope is located up in the Applegate area on Lake Arthur Road in the former Applegate Motel building, and they've been looking to find a more permanent facility where they can continue their program. Acres of Hope has identified a site in the Bowman, Auburn area, and here's a tentative site plan for what Acres of Hope is proposing to do on that site. With this current proposal, the applicant, Homes by Town, is requesting approval of a modification to the mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program for the Riolo Vineyard Specific Plan to allow an off-site alternative for the provision of affordable housing for this project. With this proposal, the applicant would be providing financial support in the amount of $575,000 to Acres of Hope to allow for the construction and expansion of that facility in Bowman. Staff conducted a net present value analysis to determine the appropriateness of the cash contribution that was being provided and concluded based upon $2012, it was relatively comparable to what could have been obtained for the Riolo Vineyard site. Additionally, with the development of the Acres of Hope site, they will be developing family units, which most of you realize is a very difficult part of the affordable housing component to get constructed here. To assure that any housing monies that are provided to Acres of Hope are used for the construction of affordable housing, there will be a deed restriction placed on the high-density parcel, once again in the northeast corner of Watt Avenue and PFE Road, until such time that the entire financial commitment has been made. Regarding the environmental analysis, the CEQA guidelines, section 15162, require the county to determine that there are no new or different impacts that were not previously considered with the previous environmental review. Staff has concluded that implementation of this project would not alter any of the identified impacts for the Riolo Vineyard project. Additionally, staff looked at the Acres of Hope site. That site was previously developed as a mobile home site, and so the redevelopment of that site will not create any new or different impacts than have already been considered. Staff does recommend that the board adopt the addendum to the certified EIR that's in your packet, and then adopt the resolution adopting the revised mitigation, monitoring, and reporting plan. Staff is available to respond to any questions the board may have.
Supervisor Duran?
Yes, Michael, I want to thank you, and I also want to thank the town realty folks. I know Dave and Jeff are back there. when this was first brought to me, several months ago, almost a year ago, there was a lot of discussion as to whether or not how this would work. But I think the overarching principle here is that we've got a win-win for everybody in the sense that we are taking a need that would be fulfilled sometime in the future. Right now it's uncertain, due to the economy, and we're actually taking those units and putting them to good use for the community right now. And I think that's a brilliant way to use those credits. And I commend, again, the town folks for stepping up to the plate and wanting to get involved to make that happen. So I certainly appreciate. I know how much time the staff spent on this to try to look at the details to make sure that it was consistent with the law, make sure it was consistent with the plan, how it would reflect on the actual Real Vineyards plan, and I do appreciate the time and effort you put into it. So.
Supervisor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Duran. This is a tremendous opportunity to help our women that have had life challenges, particularly with children. This is a great location for that, that's close to services. Not only does it help women, they have training to learn life skills, and the biggest impact, I think, is on their children, that they have a safe place to be and also see the results of the training that their mothers will have. So this is an unbelievable, tremendous opportunity, and I support it wholeheartedly. Thanks.
Supervisor Euler?
Yes. Robert is appropriately quick to remind us that the way that our Health and Human Services Department has reached out to partner with local nonprofit providers and provide services directly where needed in the communities that they're familiar with has become referred to as the Placer model throughout California. And I think this is reflective of that same kind of thinking, that very creative, we have a desired end. There might be a better way to meet that desired end, and let's figure out how we use the resources available to us, both through the development community, but also through the private sector in the delivery service through nonprofits to meet that end. And I just hope we continue to include thinking like this in our planning as we move forward. I think this is great.
Thank you. Michael, I really want to congratulate all parties on this and really thinking outside the box and coming up with something that serves an immediate and critical need. Acres of Hope right now, for those who don't know, is contained in a fairly small old motel-style structure. This will just be such a huge improvement, both for the women there, but really, as has been noted, almost more importantly for their children. This is walking distance to the local elementary school. It's easy access, unlike where it is now up in Applegate, to grocery stores at reasonable costs. It's on transportation routes that's going to just make it a lot easier for the women and children who currently utilize the Acres of Hope facility to just have a better chance to get their lives back on track and pointed in the direction they want to go. I wanted to take the opportunity, if there's anyone here either from Riello Vineyards or Acres of Hope who wanted to speak to this, please feel free to come forward and weigh in on it, because I just think this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to blow your own horn.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. It's been a while since I've addressed this body. I'm Bob Dunstan. I'm a board member now with Acres of Hope, and I'm the project manager for the site redevelopment at Bowman. Acres of Hope is just really pleased with how this has lined up and your board considering this action. I really want to thank Michael Johnson and Town Development, Dave Cook in particular, for helping to broker this that will mean so much to Acres of Hope. Will provide a significant expansion of the services that we currently provide. The hotel in Applegate has been a reasonably good facility for us. We don't own it. We'll really never have more than 10 families there. At Bowman, we have licensing through Housing and Community Development to populate with a combination of park model RVs and mobile homes, a total of 39 sites. So this has the potential over time to literally quadruple the services that we can provide. We just thank you so much for providing a piece of that opportunity to make that happen. I can answer any questions you have, but I just thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Bob. I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Frank Colton, and I was involved in the original get-go on this facility. And referencing what Supervisor Euler said a moment ago, with respect to the cooperation from Health and Human Services, I remember we took a field trip with Dr. Burton and a couple of his staff people maybe 7-8 years ago, and to San Jose and to Richmond to find out ideas of how this could happen and to mutually explore what the opportunities are. And then we came to the conclusion that the most underserved people that we have in our society are single moms with children who do not have the job skills, the kind of thing that Supervisor Holmes referenced. And then what we did is we had tentatively located this site up in Applegate. And when Ted Gaines was supervisor of District 4 for a little while, I think this was about 7 years ago, he brokered a meeting that we had with the county administrator's office, and we laid it all out what we wanted to do, and we said we want simply to be a niche player in the county's plan to end homelessness. And so we've been on board with the county the whole time, and we feel that it's a great partnership. More recently, I know Supervisor Holmes has been to the site many times, and Supervisor Montgomery and Supervisor Holmes did a site visit about a year ago, met some of the moms, some of the people that we have there, and of course we invite each of you to take the opportunity to do that. We'd be happy to arrange it. So it's very easy now to say that the county is still working together with us on a faith-based operation that benefits at no expense to the taxpayers, women with children, and we are addressing, as a niche player, your plan to end homelessness. And so my hat's off, as everyone has said up here that I've heard so far, that the town homes and the county staff have done a marvelous job in working through some rather tedious issues. And I was a kind of a third party looking in as to how this would happen, but my hat's off to all of you for doing this, and we respectfully request your endorsement of the proposal. Thank you. And I'll answer any questions and set up site reviews and all that kind of stuff if you like. You know how to get a hold of me.
Thank you, Frank.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and Board. Jim Gandley, Assistant Director for Health and Human Services. I just couldn't help myself but to come up here today to really reiterate what a watershed moment this is. I mean, the leadership of this county over the last 15 years has allowed us to build a wonderful children's shelter, to participate in a women's shelter. And the third piece of the pie is now we really have somewhere that's community-based for some of these people to matriculate to. And it's really been, as Supervisor Euler said, the Placer model that we've been devoted to all these years, and the only reason we can do it is because the leadership has supported those types of relationships that we've had with the community. So I can't think of a better way to celebrate the holiday season than to have something like this happen, especially since one of my old cohorts here has played such an important part of it, Bob Dunstan. You know, when he left, I said, Bob, what are you going to do? He said, I'll think of something. So he's been a tremendous asset to work with, and I really appreciate that. And thank you to your board for being so supportive all these years. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment on this item?
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Cook with RCH Group here on behalf of Town Development. I'd like to thank you for your support and your kind words on this. Opportunities like this don't come forward very often. And when we heard about this, we jumped in with all 4 feet. I say all 4 because my 2, if you will, and then Jeff Pimpstein here with Town Development. It's our mission with RCH as well as town's mission and the individuals that work with us to get involved where we can to help the community. And this is one of those unique win-win-win opportunities, and I'd like to thank you again. I'd like to thank Michael Johnson and his staff and Karen Schwab in County Counsel's office for getting us through the details to make this a reality. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else? Okay. Michael, was there anything you wanted to conclude with? Okay. What's the pleasure of the board? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll now move to item 7A. This is a county executive item. Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Holly Heinzen presenting on behalf of Jennifer Merchant, who is having knee surgery. Yes. No.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and members of the board. Holly Heinzen with the County Executive Office. As mentioned, I'm pinch hitting for Jennifer Merchant this morning. I'm here today to present some comments and make a request regarding the Tahoe Regional Plan update. As you know, over the last 8 or so years, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency has been furthering a planning effort to update the regional plan. It included the Pathways 2007 program that was a 2-year stakeholder process, receiving input from those around the lake and other stakeholders in the Tahoe area, a place-based planning process, as well as the Community Enhancement Program, or the CEP program that you have discussed here at this board. As you know, a multitude of county departments and individuals have followed this process and been integrated into this process over the last 8 years during the planning process. More recently, this multi-disciplinary team has been formalized to make comments and develop recommendations to your board, and over the last few years has been here as these documents has come forward so that your board can comment on this process and what was included in the proposed plan update as well as the EIS. The Regional Plan Update EIS was released in late October, and public hearings occurred both on the North Shore and the South Shore. In addition to the EIS, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency Board will discuss tomorrow and consider tomorrow the regional plan update, as well as amending policies and goals of the plan, the Code of Ordinances, the Regional Transportation Plan, and the Water Quality Management Program. The regional plan EIS has been reviewed by this multi-jurisdictional team that has been formed in the county, or technical advisory committee that has been working on it. The team acknowledges that significant progress has been made in addressing many of the Placer County issues that have been raised over the last several years. Included among the improvements is an action plan that would be in place that basically will look at future planning and additional analyses that would occur post-adoption of the plan. In addition, the IPES parcel evaluation system that has been in place for several years would be evaluated by the TRPA. The TRPA has also modified language in its housing element to be consistent with the state regulations relative to housing. They have changed language that would allow for wayfinding signage and remove some items related to the Bi-State Consultation Committee. Consistent with concerns that have been previously raised, we think that this has been good progress in terms of how they are addressing these issues. There are still some outstanding remaining issues that have been previously commented on by your board, and that does include that IPES scoring system, equity and development rights distribution and implications in Placer County, the interchangeability of development commodities, and various water quality program projects and how those strategies would be implemented. Nonetheless, we believe that they have made significant progress and are addressing these issues. To that end, our County Executive Officer, David Bosch, has met with Joanne Marquetta to identify a strategy to move forward with this plan. In that light, it was agreed that because Placer County is in concurrence, that there's been progress made, and there's some momentum there to get this plan completed. And we believe that the issues have a plan and a strategy to be addressed for those issues that are outstanding. We're asking today that your board support moving forward with the Tahoe Regional Plan, and that you authorize the county executive officer to support the plan and present to the governing board tomorrow Placer County's support of the plan. In addition, it would be requested that you concur or confirm direction to the Community Development Resource Agency to follow up on those outstanding items and work with TRPA staff on timelines and strategies to address the remaining outstanding issues. So with that, I would be happy to address any questions. I know Michael Johnson's in the audience and would also be available, and Mr. Bosch may have some comments as well.
Any questions from the board on this item? All right, seeing none. Any questions or comments from the audience on this?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, board members. I'm John Hester, the Planning Director from Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, and I want to thank you for all the support and participation over the 8 years, longer than I've been here, and for your support of the plan, and we look forward to working with you on the items that your executive has worked out with Ms. Marquetta. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Anyone else care to comment on this item? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the board. I want to echo Holly's comments on this, that it's been a document a very long time in coming. It's not perfect by any means from the county's perspective, or probably any of the other participants' perspective. When you have as many different jurisdictions and voices as part of the process, everybody ends up with half a loaf, and you kind of have to be happy with that. So it's my recommendation that this board does move forward, and that we do authorize our county executive officer to present comments tomorrow, and we do direct the Community Development Resource Agency staff to resolve the remaining issues. And I'm making the motion, even though it's not traditional for the board chair to do that, but it's been a very long time coming. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Jerry.
Madam Chairman, I'm request that the board defer discussion on item 7B until council has the opportunity to brief the board on a matter of the remaining matter of existing litigation that impacts this item.
And that brief would occur today, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, just to be clear. Is the board comfortable with that? Okay. Let's move then to item A, Facilities 8. Facility Services, Sheridan Water Supply Improvements, Project 04834.
Request is that you approve the project plans and specifications and authorize staff to solicit construction bids for the project. And you may recall that the adoption of the mitigated negative declaration was originally presented to your board on November 6th and was continued to allow us the opportunity to meet with some of the local residents of Sheridan and talk through some concerns they had with the project. To give you a little bit of background about the water supply system and the project, the water system has 184 connections, serves about 660 residents. We have 2 existing municipal wells. You can see them on the map. There is a third well that's used strictly for fire supply water, and it's not connected to the water distribution system. Our project site is located on the northwest side of town. It's behind Stewart Hall and the Sheridan Park. And there's two major benefits with this project. The first is that it'll provide us additional operational redundancy in the system. It'll improve some problems that we have during the summer months with low pressure and help us improve the redundancy there. Also bring the system into compliance with California Water Code standards on system redundancy, which is a good thing for us. The second benefit is that the project will provide up to 200 new connections for the community. And the sewer improvements that your board has approved over the last few years allowed your board to lift a moratorium that had been in place since 1984, also provided for a handful of connections. This project is really the next step in terms of moving forward and opening up the community to new connections and the potential for some growth. And we think both of those are real positive things that'll be really beneficial for the future of the community of Sheridan. The project components include installation of a new water supply well. It'll be sized to produce 250 gallons per minute at its peak. We'll also be installing a 180,000 gallon storage tank, and you can see the dimensions of it there. It's 24 foot tall, 41 foot in diameter. That works out to about 1,300 square foot for a footprint, which is about the size of a single family home. We'll also be installing a pump station control building, and that'll have a 700 square foot footprint. And then we'll be installing about 2,500 linear feet of piping to provide fire flow to the Sheridan Elementary School. In terms of environmental review, our environmental consultant prepared an initial study that determined that all of the project impacts could be mitigated to less than significant levels, and as such that the mitigated negative declaration was the appropriate environmental document. The mitigated negative declaration was prepared and circulated in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act. We made a number of trips down to Sheridan and presented the project to the MAC, and followed that up by presenting it to your board on November 6th for adoption. Since the November 6th meeting, we did go down and we met in Sheridan with a group of about 10 local property owners. It was, from my perspective, really fruitful discussion. We took our engineers, our hydrologists, our environmental consultant, and we spent a lot of time talking through the science and the hydrology and the engineering behind the project. It was also a really good opportunity for us to listen to the community and hear what their concerns were with the project and to try to work with them to find ways to work through those issues. The two issues that were expressed to us focused on the potential effects of the new well on existing local wells in the community, and then the second issue was the potential effects on local views. And what we'd like to do is walk you briefly through each one of those issues, and I'm going to turn things over to Kevin and let him lead that discussion.
So as Bill mentioned, the neighboring residents had two concerns, and the first was related to potential effects on the local wells. For some background, the proposed well will be drilled into the Central Valley Aquifer, which is shown on the figure on the screen. And it's basically a big bowl that stretches from Redding to Bakersfield, and it is recharged from the Sierras on the east and from the coastal range on the west. USGS has estimated that the aquifer is capable of producing between 10 to 15 million acre-feet of water per year, or in terms of gallons, 3.5 to 5 trillion gallons per year. The aquifer in Sheridan is near the edge, and therefore it's slightly shallower as you get out to the edge. However, in the Sheridan area, the flow of the water in the aquifer is from east to west as it's recharging from the Sierras. And so the aquifer is recharged through the Sheridan area. To provide a frame of reference, the table here shows that the capacities of other municipal wells in nearby communities, which have capacities up to 2,100 gallons per minute. In addition, there are multiple ag wells in the vicinity of Sheridan and Lincoln and Wheatland. And there's one approximately 1 mile north. It's a new ag well that's rated for approximately 900 gallons per minute. It's 1 mile north of our proposed well site. It should be noted that the county doesn't have control over the number of ag wells or their capacity. The concerns of the residents included the potential effects on both the water quantity and also the water quality in the local wells. The county, during the design process, drilled a test hole to gather information about the soil and the water quality at the proposed site, and based on that information, the radius of influence of our proposed well was conservatively calculated to be approximately 110 feet. As you can see in the figure, our proposed well is 600 feet from the nearest well, and that well is actually located on a property that's connected to the public water system, so it's not currently used. The wells of the residents that have expressed concerns are up on Lichty Road, and that's actually spelled incorrectly up there. I apologize for that. And that's approximately 1,400 feet from our proposed well site. The concern regarding water quality is related to a mineral deposit that you can actually see in the upper left-hand corner. You can see the edge of it there. And that's west of Lichty Road, and it's approximately 1,600 feet from our proposed well. As discussed earlier, the flow of the aquifer in this area is from east to west, and the recharge water flows through Sheridan. And the amount of water proposed to be drawn from this well is very small compared to the other wells and the amount of water that flows into the aquifer, meaning that there's virtually no risk to changing the flow of the aquifer or impacting the nearby wells. Regarding the mineral deposit, the site is not listed on any contaminated sites with the state or federal government. And we actually brought California Department of Public Health out to the site to have a site visit. They actually took some samples of the material at the site, and it didn't raise any concerns or raise any flags with the Department of Public Health. Therefore, based on all this information, there's no indication that the proposed well will have any effect on the quantity or the quality of the water in the nearby wells. This information was provided to the concerned residents during a meeting on November 16th that Bill mentioned, and it was a very productive meeting. At that point, staff agreed to provide commitments indicating that the county would establish a monitoring program and would be responsible for remediating any adverse impacts to local wells caused by the proposed well, should any occur. County staff decided to provide these commitments. Actually, during the meeting, there was discussion about county staff providing a letter to the residents who attended the meeting. When we were preparing our response, we actually decided to amend the response to comments so that it would be incorporated as part of the administrative record for the mitigated negative declaration, and then it would be available to other folks who were not necessarily at that meeting. The revised language is shown here and is included in your board package. The other concern was related to the effects on local views as a result of the construction of the tank and the 700 square foot single-story control building. The proposed well is located behind Stewart Hall, as Bill mentioned, and it backs up to the railroad and Highway 65 to the west. The main scenic corridor in the Sheridan area is toward the Sierras, and there are several structures in the area that are similar or larger in size to the proposed tank, including a warehouse to the south and several barns along Camp Far West Road. At our meeting on the 16th, the county staff also agreed to plant trees along the northern boundary of the well site to shield the view from Lichty Road and to also paint the control building consistent with the agricultural surroundings. And again, the specific language is shown on the slide and is included in the board package. We understand that the local residents still have concerns about the implementation of the commitments that we have made, and county staff has followed up with the residents both last week and yesterday, and have scheduled an additional meeting for December 21st, and we'll continue to work with the residents there to implement the commitments that we've made. However, we do believe that the issues are adequately addressed for the mitigated negative declaration. And as mentioned, the studies that were completed as part of the environmental review process reflected virtually no risk to any of the neighboring wells. And so with that, we are asking your board to move forward with our requested actions today, which will allow us to apply for the USDA grants, which is a critical path for us on this project at this point.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Kevin or Bill before we open it up? Okay. I understand that, I believe it's Mr. Steve Starling. Were you going to be speaking for the residents?
Yes.
Okay. Since you'll be speaking for the residents as a group, I'll give you 5 minutes instead of the traditional 3. And then if there are individuals who want to speak, they can have their 3 minutes.
I thought I got 3 minutes for each person. That'd be about 150 minutes.
We don't actually do it 3 minutes for each person, no. Just as a identified member of a group, we grant 5 minutes.
Okay.
Or if you would prefer, you can have 3 minutes per person and they can speak individually.
Okay. Got that cleared up.
Okay.
First of all, we want to go on the record that we oppose the negative declaration, obviously, the way it stands. And I know everybody says it will not affect any wells, anything around there, nothing's going to change, but we can't as property owners sit there and let that happen without any kind of anything for us to act on later if something does happen. And you do understand that if our well, because everybody has said nothing will change, our quality won't change, our well elevations, our groundwater heights won't change. If it changes at all, then the negative declaration is wrong. I mean, does that make any sense? We can't. The report, the negative declaration report from Caldwell and Brown, they don't say it's 100%. They have a disclaimer in it that says it might not be right. And they might have made a mistake somewhere. I know they're all engineers and they're all very smart, but if they could take out that negative declaration, we'd have more ammo later. And we have worked with Kevin and Bill and also Michelle, and it has been sort of productive, and we were kind of disappointed with the letter we got and the new revisions to the issue on the well. We asked for specifics, or a lot of specifics, and we really didn't get much. And I know he's trying to leave a way out in case something happens to limit the liability of Placer County, but there's nothing in there that'll help us. And yesterday they recommended that we put our own language in there for them to look at, and we're going to try to get that done before the next meeting we have on the 21st, I think it is. And we don't mind doing that, and we don't mind working with you, but I think if from all my information that I've gathered, once you guys sign or approve this the way it is now, we're pretty much begging for what we can get. And everybody keeps assuring me it'll be okay, but 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, who knows what's going to happen. Bill probably retired, living in the mountains somewhere, fishing, and we'll be down there trying to get water. And the other issue about the copper area there, I don't know if anybody really knows what's there. I know the guy was there, took one sample, and declared it was fine. We don't know what that is. One of our residents has a pool that he has to special treat because it turns kind of a blue-green when he pumps the water out, and he's one of the closer ones to that well. Also, they said the water runs east to west. It probably does. I'm sure it does. It runs to the low spot, and the new well is going to create a new little low spot, which could cause our the water to run to that hole, to fill that hole. I know it's only 108 feet it's supposed to affect, but I find that really hard to believe. And if there is a contamination in the groundwater, it'll probably never get to your well. But we're right in the middle, or not even in the middle. We're at the edge. And if it migrates 25 feet or 50 feet, we'll be affected. And there was no language in that letter or revision that will account for any kind of time frame on any of the repairs, or who's going to decide what needs to be done. Is it the Placer County going to decide? Is there going to be a third party, or do we get to decide, or what? We don't know for sure, and we probably won't know for sure until it happens. Hopefully it's not going to happen, but we have to protect our property rights, and I know it's been discussed earlier today about property rights, and we have to protect ours. And not that you're not willing to listen. You guys listen really well. It's just we have trouble getting responses. I guess my time's up, huh?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Any other comment on this?
Lee Bastian, I'm with the Sheridan Municipal Advisory Committee. I live just 3/4 of a mile northeast of the proposed well, and my well is also a half-mile north of the current well that we use for the city. And I've been there over 20 years, and I've had no water issues whatsoever with my well, even though I'm a half-mile north of the one that's already supplying. And so I ask that you recommend the approval of this project.
Thank you, Lee. Supervisor Duran?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for Bill, just to kind of clarify what I just heard. With regards to the actual negative declaration, you had some findings that said that there would not be any difference in water quality and water quantity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, on top of that, you've also implemented an MMRP, which is a mitigating and monitoring of that particular well, to ensure that if there is any changes, you will be aware of those changes, correct?
Correct, and that is an ongoing commitment.
That's an ongoing commitment until
forever.
Okay.
It goes on into the future.
Great. And then on top of that, if hypothetically you were to find that either the quantity or the quality of the water were to degrade, what would be your response, the county's response?
I think it would depend on what the actual impact was. We have a number of responses that we could go to. We could hook them into the public water system. We could go in and re-drill their well, lower their production pump. We have 3 wells in the community. We could rebalance them so that we're drawing less on the new well and more on the other wells to try and alleviate the concern that way.
And that is a responsibility of the counties once we install this well, correct?
Correct.
And on top of that, you're asking, and it looks in the staff report, it says, in order to address the concerns expressed, staff agreed to provide additional language documenting the county's responsibility to remediate any documented adverse impacts to the quantity and quality of the groundwater wells in the vicinity of the project resulting from the installation and operation of the new municipal well.
Correct.
And is that the language that the gentleman was talking about that was going to be included in the document?
Yes.
Or is this additional language as well?
This is language that will be included in the response to comments to the mitigated negative declaration. So this will be part of the administrative record.
Okay, great. And as far as the language that they're supposed to provide you, I'm getting a little confused. Are they to review the language that's going to be included? Is that what you're talking about? Or are they going to actually provide language that's going to make them feel a little bit more comfortable about the process?
We found out late last week, on Friday, I believe it was, that they still had some remaining concerns with the way some of the things were worded and what the language was and what our commitments actually were and how we would implement those. And part of what we're going to do, as Kevin mentioned, is we're going to figure out, the language that we added was intended to provide our commitment that if we cause an adverse impact or an adverse effect, that we'll come in and fix it. How we do that and the timing of that and what that is, those are the things that we're going to try and work through the local residents with, and if they have thoughts and suggestions as to how that should be worded, that's what we're really looking for.
Okay. Now, hold on. This isn't the first time that you've dug a well before in Placer County, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you have remedies in place if there are issues down the road, correct? And processes in place, correct? Are those
Correct.
processes written down?
I'm not sure if they are.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my question was...
Could you come up to the...
Yeah, please come up to that podium.
Another 5 minutes? My question's to Bill on where the language that we're going to provide for this meeting, where does that go? I think you asked a similar question. Is that going to be included in the negative declaration or just comments?
Well, I think until I see the actual language, I couldn't...
Well, see, there we are, back in the same point, where you can control what's going to go on, and we have no say.
Sir, I'm sorry, but I didn't hear that. What I heard is that you were going to provide, your group, the community, was going to provide some language to the county.
Right.
And the county would take a look at it, you know.
And he will decide where it goes. It's kind of like deciding what they do with their repair. We won't have any control at that point.
Yeah, and understand that your comments, like comments on any other project, will be taken into consideration, and where applicable, will be included within the language that the county will adhere to moving into the future. But this is a county project on a county parcel, I believe.
Correct.
And so, it would be as if you wouldn't want the county coming to you and saying, well, you can't put a well here.
Well, they do.
Well, just,
Yeah.
I think what the county is offering to you and to the local residents is the highest level of responsiveness that can be achieved in this situation. And the language that I'm looking at that is going to be in the mitigated negative declaration is actually it's probably the strongest language I've ever seen in terms of commitments to communities. I mean, it says the county is responsible for remediating any documented adverse effects to the quality or quantity of groundwater wells in the vicinity of the new municipal well site resulting from installation or operation. That's very, very strong language. That's a very strong commitment from the county. I understand your concern about the time frame, but I think depending on what that documented adverse effect is, would create different scenarios of time frames, and we can't game plan for all those different scenarios ahead of time.
Right, so we just, what do we do? What would you do if it was your property? Just go along with it?
I would do as Supervisor Duran suggested and bring the language forward to Bill and see where it's appropriate to craft it and include it in the mitigated neg deck. And there may be some things that we just literally can't commit to because this time frame, for example, we don't know what the issue could be, so we can't cover the spectrum of everything that might possibly happen.
Right.
And in the future, if you do notice some issues with quality and quantity, then you need to contact us so we can take care of that pursuant to the negative deck.
And some of that language in there now says that it has to be a documented change, and if all the wells aren't monitored, we're not going to know if it's a documented change or not.
But the language, the follow-up language on this says, concurrent with the implementation of the project, the county will, and again, this is mandatory language, will compile baseline information on groundwater elevations and quality from private wells,
right,
meaning yours, within the vicinity of the project, and will develop an ongoing monitoring program to assess any potential impacts. So that gets exactly to the concern that you just raised.
Kevin told me yesterday that they weren't going to monitor all the wells. They were going to pick a select few. Is that right?
I think I said that we'll work with the residents to figure out which wells are appropriate to monitor and the frequency and duration and all of that. That's something that we'll be working with the residents. Some of the residents may not want us on their property monitoring their wells, so I can't say that we're going to monitor every one of them. But yeah, it's something that we want to work with you guys to figure out what are the right wells, and we'll work through that.
And I don't quite understand how that's going to work. If the well that you monitor has a problem, you're going to provide water for all the wells? All the people with wells, or just that one person that has it monitored?
Any documented adverse impact. So if
Right, with
one
that
well
one well.
shows a problem, then one well will be addressed.
And
If
so-
all wells show a problem, then all wells would be addressed.
So it's left up to us to document our wells
Yes, absolutely.
on our own, with
Though
our own
Plas-
money,
though Placer
so you can do
County-
your well.
No, it's up to you. Placer County will create a monitoring program.
Right.
Placer County will take that responsibility and create the existing baseline. It's your responsibility, if you notice a problem with your well, to call these guys and say, there's a problem with my well. That's your responsibility. It's not your responsibility to pay to monitor it. It's not your responsibility to do a baseline study right now. Tell me if I'm wrong, but
You're
this is
correct.
how I interpret this language. Your responsibility moving forward would be, you go out, you have a look at your well, and you notice that it's purple all of a sudden, the water that's in there. You need to call them and say, hey man, the water in my well's purple. You need to come out here and have a look at it and fix this problem. That's your responsibility.
Right, so we have to monitor our own wells? No.
No.
You're going to monitor a select few wells, and that's going to account for all the wells?
And I'm
And that's
assuming
gonna
that
be-
you, like a responsible well owner,
Right.
go out every year, do a well inspection, probably every couple of months, inspect the well, inspect the pump, inspect the water, run some water quality studies, and make sure that your well is performing as you hope it would. Our expectation is you continue to do exactly what you're doing now, and if you identify a problem, you let us know. That's no different than what you're doing right now.
Right. I don't agree, but...
Supervisor Wygant.
I'd just offer up a couple of, first of all, appreciate everybody spending all the time and energy on this and the work that staff has done outreaching in the community. One comment, well, first of all, I guess I would frame this with proportion. The county does not have the authority to prevent people putting in wells. We have the authority to make sure that the wells are done in accordance with the quality standards as per environmental health. But there are 3 times as much acreage in rice production as there was when I was a kid growing up here. Something like 70-80% of the rice production is done on well water, even though we have ag deliveries from NID, South Sutter, and PCWA. Many of those wells are huge as compared to this additional well that we want to put in, which is why mitigated neg deck essentially calls out that the impact from this well is almost certainly to be 110 or 20 feet as compared to the water basin Valley of California wide. So that perspective is the basis by which we're starting this. Obviously, Placer County can't control this water basin from Reading all the way down to Bakersfield, but we can sure study and take a look at the kinds of things that have happened over time and what's likely to happen in the future, and that's what we've done. Additionally, as compared to the details that the county is offering up as guarantees to the fullest extent that we can, you can call me. And my number's in the telephone book. And obviously, I won't be on the Board of Supervisors forever, so somebody's going to likely replace me. And you're going to have to make sure that, I guess, 100 years from now, that well may or may not be working, but local government at least should and hopefully will be accessible. But with that, in that we are local government, if you can get whoever is representing you to get 2 other votes on the Board of Supervisors, we can pretty much do anything that's legal as it relates to the authority that the county has. So if you don't like the answers that you're getting from staff, let's say we put this well in and all of a sudden your well goes dry or your water turns whatever color Jennifer described, and you think that these people aren't treating you appropriately, all you have to do is get back up here, and if you can get 3 of us to agree with you, we'll do essentially whatever you want us to do as long as county council says that we have the authority to do it. We can't perfectly guarantee everything and anything, but I think we've come as close to that as we possibly can.
All right. Well, the only other thing is, I wanted to mention the fact that you saw that photo, what was it, number 3, with that bare spot up there. That spot has been bare for 80-some years, and nothing grows on it at all. And we're concerned that if that water leaches into the soil, which I'm sure it has, and I'm sure it's in the water table, if that comes to us, we don't know what the effects are. And the health department says nothing, but, what do we have to do? Get sick or have a dog die or a horse, get sick to find out? I don't know. Anyway, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Robert, your light is still on. Did you have more? Okay. Jim? Kevin? Bill? Kevin? Anything else?
No, ma'am.
All right. Bring it back to the board. It's the pleasure of the board.
Move approval staff recommendation, which is essentially to provide the mitigated negative is the appropriate document and approve the mitigation monitoring program, as well as approve the specifications
And plans to proceed with the project and the grant application.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now move to item 9, Health and Human Services, Adult System of Care. Maureen Baumann presenting.
And I'm requesting that you adopt the Mental Health Services Act annual update, which updates the Mental Health Services Act program and expenditure plan. In 2005, Placer County received funding and implemented services under the state-funded Mental Health Services Act. Each year, a state-required report is written on the activities of the past year and proposed activities of the coming year. And this memo highlights actually the past year of 10-11 and is the plan for continuation of the current year, 12-13. I would point out that in June of 2012, the governor amended the act with Assembly Bill 1467. So prior to this time, we've been getting approval at the state level, and from here on out, the boards of supervisors are required to approve any sort of planning activity that we have. The Mental Health Services Act has 5 components: community services and supports, which provides direct services to individuals, and systems, workforce education and training, capital facilities and technology, prevention and early intervention, and innovation programs. We have many, many successful programs, and we have had impacts in terms of the many people that have received services as a result of these. Over 8,600 people were served through the community services and supports in the last year, and 2,700 through the prevention and early intervention components. We have 2 new subsidized permanent housing programs that are providing new housing options for 17 people, and some mini grants that were just implemented that we will get the results from. But the 2 community foundations implemented mini grants as well as 5 large grants, and so we're very excited about the outcomes of those programs. So quickly, I just want to highlight a few of the outcomes that we have. The almost 2,000 people that were served in this outreach and engagement intensive out-client services program had significant reductions in homelessness, 86%, emergency interventions, 83%, psychiatric hospitalizations, 40%, and arrests, 70%. And we also had 2,700 people receive services after they were not hospitalized from a psychiatric emergency, but received follow-up services, and we are sure we are reducing the amount of hospitalizations as a result of those. Over 4,000 people received training and support to assist in the recovery process. This included staff and consumers. And we have many advocate programs, family advocates, youth advocates, peer programs that are implemented as a result of this with the Latino community and all ages. We know that peer programs are evidence-based, and we are seeing positive results as they assist people so that they really make the best use of all the many resources that exist in Placer County. Our prevention programs provided evidence-based parenting programs to over 2,700 persons. Grief therapy, support, and skill development was provided to parents and youth, resulting in an increase in family functioning, decrease in youth delinquency, and increase in the ability to manage stress. In addition, we had some targeted grief therapy for depression and also saw significant impacts with significant decrease in symptoms and increase in life functioning. Lastly, to highlight, we really had a target to serve some of the people that were not traditionally served. This includes people in locked institutions and other places, but one goal was to really get efforts out to specific populations. And so I would say that over 1,800 persons in the Hispanic and Native American communities received culturally appropriate services as a result of their engagement, and as well as improved service outcomes. We have a campaign for community wellness that was part of the community process oversees the implementation of this planning act. And in addition, our Mental Health, Alcohol, and Drug Board is responsible for a public hearing, which occurred November 26th. We heard public comments, and the report that you have, the annual plan, includes the county's response to that plan. So I would tell you that the campaign is very enthused about the projects that we have implemented. The Mental Health, Alcohol, and Drug Board is in support of that. And so we are here just to recommend you to approve the annual plan. It's a lot of dollars. We have $9 million of expenditures in this proposed plan. No county dollars are included. I know there are a couple of people here that might want to comment on the plan, but I'd be happy to answer any questions and recommend approval.
Any questions for Maureen before we hear some additional comments? All right, seeing none. Maureen, who would you like to have come forward?
We have our vice chairperson from the Mental Health, Alcohol, and Drug Board that just wants to say a few words.
Excellent.
However you want. You can sit and push the microphone. Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid you're going to hear my stomach growling.
Push that red.
Okay. Yes, my name's Janet O'Meara, and I am on the executive board of the Mental Health, Alcohol, and Drug Advisory Board. I am a family member. I have a brother who has schizophrenia, but he does not live in Placer County. He's in New Jersey. So before coming to Placer County, I've been very active with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. You may have heard of it. It's called NAMI, and there is a local chapter, and some of my money goes to that. My personal interest is seeing that persons who have what they call serious and persistent mental illness get everything they need. And towards that end, on the committee, on the board, I volunteered to look into a couple areas, and from there we decided that really what would be best would be an adult-focused committee, so we do have that now. Will Taylor, who's in the audience, is one of the members on that. And that's been encouraging. It's a very passionate group. But when it comes to the Mental Health Services Act money, there's a wisdom in seeing that some of this money is going not just to that population, but spreading out to the larger community, particularly with the prevention, early intervention, and the innovations, because the broader mental health concerns, whether it's depression, isolation, that sort of thing, there's ripple effects from all of that. I mean, as there is certainly with serious mental illness. But the nice thing is that the process is that it used to be, the government says, here's the services, take them, go fix yourself. But now it's coming back to community and stakeholders, and that isn't just geographic. It's also cultural. So, for instance, certain groups have a better idea of how help can be of the most use. And on the board, we recently, some of us went to a campaign for community wellness meeting that was up in the North Tahoe area. And we heard they presented what programs they're doing up there with some of these monies, and they had some speakers. And some of them were some young girls, high school age, who spoke about two different projects that these dollars were going towards. And, they're just going to the programs. They don't know what's on all the formal little pieces of paper and the grants about how this is going to help their lives. But they demonstrated just in the way they were able to talk confidently to us. And you could see that these young girls, through these programs, and it's also for young, all young people, the one they were talking about wasn't just girls, but that they are actually getting very useful tools that are going to be with them for the rest of their life. They're helping their neighbors, their peers in the community. So we were able to actively see how these dollars are at work. One of the overriding principles of the Mental Health Services Act monies is collaboration. I'm really proud when I read the paper and I see some of the troubles Sacramento goes through. It's a bigger county here in Placer County. We have such good communication that I witness all the time at the Campaign for Community Wellness. And just the people who work, you can see they're not doing, maybe some of them are doing it, I suppose, for a paycheck. You can ask them. But I do see a lot of concern and commitment from the people who work in these areas. So Basically, I just want to say that I think it's going really well. I consider myself an advocate, so the operative word for me is more, never happy. I want to see more all the time, but we're working towards that, so that's what I want to say to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Janet? Seeing none?
We have one more speaker, Will Taylor, who is actually the consumer of the liaison for consumer affairs and works for Mental Health America.
Hi. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Will Taylor. I was hired by Mental Health America back in January of last year as the Consumer Affairs Coordinator for Placer County. I'm a contractor with the Adult System of Care. I'm also a recipient of Adult System of Care services. 4 years ago, I was gravely disabled from my mental illness, and I was homeless. Placer County's medical services are top-notch. They're the best I've ever received, and I've worked in the private sector for over 16 years. And I had private insurance, and my private insurance didn't compare. The psychiatrist at Kirby Hills, Dr. Olga Ignatowicz, worked with me as a partner to change my medication regimen so I could work, basically be as effective in society as possible. I now work full-time in this position, and I'm a direct beneficiary of Mental Health Services Act monies in several ways. One, I was hired about 2 years ago as a navigator, which is a part-time entry-level position that helps people who have a mental illness who are in recovery get back to work. I've been out of work for about 2 years, and finding a job in this economy was near impossible, especially with having been out of work for that long. So this gave me a chance to become independent. From that position, I got hired as a consumer advocate to represent the voice of people with mental illness to the leadership of Placer County. It's been a tremendous opportunity, and I'm grateful for it. I'm really pleased. There's always room for improvement, but the way Mental Health Services Act monies have been used have really changed a lot of people's lives, including mine, and I really encourage you to support this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Sir, I just have a comment, and I wanted to thank you for your courage in being able to stand up here before us and tell us about something that's extremely personal. And I want to congratulate you on your recovery, and I wish you continued success as you go and develop and grow down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can't top that. Thank you. Okay, that's it. Any other public comment on this? All right, bring this back to the board.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the Mental Health Services Act fiscal year 2012-13 annual update, Placer Mental Health Services Act program, and expenditure plan.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Will. We'll now move to Sheriff's Department, Placer Regional Auto Theft Task Force Annual Report. Mike Beauregard presenting.
Madam Chair, members of the board. I just want to go over a little bit of the stats. I know this is a long day, so good afternoon. The 2012 stats have not come out yet through our department, the California Highway Patrol. I ran some through Department of Justice, and so up to December of 2012, we've seen quite a significant decrease in the cities in Placer County. With one exception, Lincoln went up 5%. We're going to address that when I get back. But most of the other counties, 8% up to a 66% decline up in the Gold Run area. So I think we're doing very well. We welcomed a new member from Roseville. We rotated out one, so we're in the process of getting him up to speed. We're going to be losing a Rockland member here pretty soon, so we'll be replacing him as well. We're working very closely with the Sacramento County Vehicle Theft Task Force for cross-county issues. Obviously, one of our bigger problems are people coming into our county, not our residents, as the major problem with vehicle theft, so that's working very well. Over the last year, we just closed a long-term investigation. We worked with our Sacramento County Investigative Services Unit, which went very well. We targeted the professional thief, the multiple vehicle theft. That's going to be going to the district attorney pretty soon with arrests. And kind of our goals for 2013 is prevention. Obviously, that's our biggest problem. Are people who are doing the at this time of year, warming up their cars, leaving them in the driveway. We're going to start trying to address those. We're going to try to get a website going and focus on the prevention. The other thing we're working on is a club giveaway. Another problem is what we call the daytime thefts. A lot of the crooks here, we don't have a professional problem per se where they're stripping the cars, chop shop. We have the transportation theft, where it's an older car. They can use kind of a shaved key. They take the car, they go take what they want, go to the next car. So one of the things we want to try to go after is prevention with those and with the club giveaway. So we're working with the National Insurance Crime Bureau. We're going to try to get some insurance companies involved and get these things out and target those type of vehicles to help prevent that. And that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Supervisor Euler.
Yes, quick question. In our staff report, final paragraph under background, you're showing in 2011 590 thefts, I'm guessing, with 80 vehicles recovered?
Yeah, those stats, the problem with them, they're some of them are fiscal year stats and some are calendar year. So it's kind of hard to explain. Are you looking at where they're going, or
what I'm getting at is the apparent incongruity between that and the summary on the next page on 154 under countywide activity, where you report the same number of thefts, 590, but recoveries dramatically higher at 434. And so in the one area we report 80 recoveries, in the other area we're reporting 434 recoveries. I prefer the latter.
I believe that 80 may be for my team, and the 434 are countywide.
Okay, so is it the number of thefts, though, countywide are 590, 80 of the recoveries countywide are attributable to your team, the remainder are...
I believe so. I don't have the report in front of me, but that's the problem with the statistics. When we get them, a lot of times we're trying to get them the most current stats for you. The problem is there's usually a month or two delay getting from the Department of Justice to the California Highway Patrol, who tracks those stats for the vehicle theft coordinator for the state. So there's a kind of a lag time, so that could be the issue on that.
Okay. And when we talk countywide, because your task force, if I recall correctly, is comprised of representatives from CHP, the various police departments, as well as Sheriff's Department, correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay. And so when we're talking about the county-wide numbers, we're talking about recoveries made by other law enforcement, or somebody just found the car. Somebody reports an abandoned vehicle somewhere, that's considered recovered. Those figure into the statistics, as opposed to just what your task force is.
Correct. That would be a law enforcement agency would go out and recover that vehicle, but yes.
Okay. And do you recall where we were as a recovery rate prior to the adoption of this fee and the associated assembly of your task force?
I don't know about the recovery rate. I know the vehicle theft rate has dropped off dramatically. We were, and I have those figures at home, I think we're at like 1,300 thefts back prior to 2007.
So our recovery percentage might have remained relatively static, but you're talking about a much smaller denominator.
Correct. And with recovery percentages, that's the amount of recoveries in Placer County. The vehicle recovered in Sacramento County is not going to be on that statistic.
Okay.
So we don't recover all our vehicles in Placer. A majority go to Sacramento County.
Okay. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any member of the audience want to comment on this? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much. This is just an informational report. We would do appreciate you bringing this forward to us each year and just updating us on the progress. And I'd like to see the year-over-year recovery go from 51% to 73%. That's very encouraging.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. And having saved the best for last, at least for this departmental grouping, we have Sergeant Ty Connors giving us a report on the Distracted Driving Enforcement Program.
Madam Chair, if I could speak real quick, it's Captain Don Hutchinson with the Sheriff's Department.
And this item is to approve a budget revision to increase revenue and expenditures in the amount of $15,519 received from the California Office of Traffic Safety for the reimbursement of overtime costs for deputies assigned to the Distracted Driving Enforcement Program for the period of November 1st, 2012 through September 30th, 2013. And today we have the commander of our Colfax substation, Sergeant Ty Connors, to speak to this issue.
And my apologies, Hutch, I didn't mean to slight you.
Pardon?
My apologies, I didn't mean to slight you.
No problem.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Sergeant Ty Connors, Colfax Station Commander. I do move for a motion to make wider seats so we can fit in here a little bit better. But I wish I was up earlier when we had a full house, because this is really good information for everybody to know regarding distracted driving. So I'll just work with the 4 people that are here. The California Office of Traffic Safety has teamed up with the U.S. Department of Transportation National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, California Highway Patrol, and 37 law enforcement agencies across the greater Sacramento region. Our little town of Colfax was part of the 37 agencies to be involved with this program. The program that NHTSA started back in New York and in Connecticut was their first pilot program, and then the second pilot program has been Delaware and California. The effort is a pilot program using the region to test tactics that may be employed nationally in the future. OTS awarded $600,000 in federal funds for these special high-visibility law enforcement operations, which will occur in intervals over the next 8 months. We had just finished, completed a phase back in November 30th through December 9th was the first phase. The other phases will be scheduled back in February, then also in June, when there'll be another 2-week phase of distracted driving enforcement. Just to kind of let you know some information on why this is so important, you might have seen some infomercials that OTS has put out regarding the people texting and talking on their phone, and then they get in a lot of crashes. When I brought this up yesterday, I attended Supervisor Montgomery's coffee meeting, and to our surprise, one of the gentlemen that was there stated that he just lost his niece in Oregon to a distracted driving accident. So definitely sets home to why we're doing this. Because too many drivers still don't get the message that using a cell phone while driving can be dangerous and deadly, this initial distracted driving crackdown marks the first of many enforcement waves taking place over the next year. California's distracted driving law bans all drivers from using handheld devices and texting while operating a motor vehicle. Yet in 2011, California Department of Motor Vehicles reported 460,000 handheld cell phone convictions, up from 361,000 in 2010. So people aren't getting the message, and so this is the reason why they're trying to do a little more of a crackdown. Just another note of why this has been growing. And back in 1987, there was 1 million cell phones in use. Back in 2010, 302 million cell phones are now in use. Back in 2005, 10% of all accidents have all been related to distracted driving using a cell phone. In 2010, 21%. So there's definitely been an increase. So kind of another example of real good information of how distracted driving or texting can kind of set this in tone is sending or receiving a text message takes a driver's eyes off the road for an average of 4.6 seconds. That's equivalent of driving blindfolded 55 miles an hour at the length of an entire football field. So there's a lot of time for people to get in an accident while texting. So this is just a little information regarding why it's so important for us to work together with OTS and NHTSA and being part of this pilot program. So my job is basically to, organize and come up with the time frames that we'll be doing the distracted driving, mainly in the Colfax area. So a lot of Colfax people are not too happy with me, but I think it's very important. And I'm also going to be working with some of the other agencies in Placer County. I think it'd be real important to kind of do it as a group effort as well. And maybe during some of the phases that we'll provide some of our guys on the distracted driver grant to go down and help Rockland with one of their days, and then vice versa, they'll come up and help us to really make it a countywide event. So if anyone has any questions.
Supervisor Euler?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was from the last time.
All right?
Although since the light is on.
Since your light is on.
You said that the distance of an entire football field blindfolded.
At
And of course, as a Cal guy, all I'm thinking is, boy, you could take out the entire Stanford band.
Supervisor Holmes.
I was just curious, you mentioned that you have issued some citations regarding distracted driving. Is there some kind of a folder or something, insert that you give people to explain what you just told us about the rise of, 21% on traffic accidents, so it kind of set the tone home for them when they get that citation?
Well, one thing they did was a big media push back right on November 28th. We were down in Sacramento for all the agencies that were involved with it. And they handed out a lot of pamphlets. And one thing with a lot of the statistics is that it does reach the younger generation. And so we did a lot of information building with the high schools and giving them information that they can pass out. And then also through the media blast that they've been doing through the local newspapers, we've been also providing a lot of this information that was there.
Well, I'm glad to hear that this is going to be expanded to the rest of the county, because I thought you were just picking on me.
Yes.
Since I drive past you guys every day, not talking on the phone. Okay, so we're being asked today to approve a budget revision. What's the pleasure of the board? This is a roll call.
Duran. Yes. Wygant. Euler. Montgomery.
Yes. Okay. I believe. Yeah. I believe now we're going to go back into closed session.
The board will now readjourn to closed session to discuss the remaining litigation item, Sierra Club versus Placer County and Placer Citizens versus Gridlock versus Placer County, and its conference with real property negotiators.